Hello and welcome to Decision Nova Scotia 2021. Thank you so much for joining us as we guide you through this provincial election. I'm Sarah Ritchie. Our team here at Global News is ready to bring you the latest from the victory parties to the concession speeches and everything in between. We're broadcasting live tonight on the main network and on the Global News app on your phone or TV. We're also streaming live online. So if you need to leave the house before things are finalized, we've got you covered. Our reporters are with the three main party leaders tonight. Elizabeth McSheffrey is in Halifax with Liberal leader Iain Rankin. Alicia Drouse is in New Glasgow at PC leader Tim Houston's headquarters. And Alexa McLean is in Dartmouth with NDP leader Gary Burrell. And joining me in studio tonight to break down the results is Laurie Turnbull, a political science professor and the director of the School of Public Administration at Dalhousie University. Over in Ottawa, our chief political correspondent David Aiken is keeping an eye on each of the 55 races underway tonight. And Ross Lord is here in Halifax as well. He's going to be talking to a number of Nova Scotians tonight on a range of issues from affordability to the environment to health and long-term care. Now, before those results start pouring in, just a quick explanation about what you're seeing here. If you're watching online, you can click on your riding for updated results anytime. For those of you watching on TV or on the app, you can see the L frame here on your screen, and this is where we're going to show you live results as they're reported by Elections Nova Scotia. So the bottom of your screen, this is where you'll see overall standings. Each of the parties is trying to get to 28 seats tonight. That is majority territory. Along the side, you'll see results for each of the 55 individual ridings. Now, before those results start coming in, we want to take a look at where the Nova Scotia legislature was before the writ dropped on July 17th and where we'll be tomorrow.
The makeup of the legislature is about to change, and who will sit on the government side we'll soon find out. There is one certainty. After Election Day, there will be more seats in this chamber. When Iain Rankin dissolved the legislature in mid-July, there were 51 electoral districts. Nova Scotians will today elect 55 representatives because the map was redrawn in 2019. 4 ridings have been added. Argyll, Clare, Richmond, and Preston are so-called protected ridings, meant to ensure Acadian and Black voters are represented in the House. That's a return to the way things were before 2012. There are also new ridings in fast-growing areas around Halifax. Here's how things stood when we entered this election. The Liberals held 24 seats, just shy of a majority. The Progressive Conservatives, 17, and the New Democrat Party had 5. When the PCs ousted Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson in June, she became the third independent MLA, joining her former caucus member Alana Pon and ex-Liberal Hugh McKay. Pon and Smith Mccrosson are running as independents. 2 former Liberal seats were vacant at dissolution. Annapolis, which was held by former Premier Stephen McNeil, and Hants East, where former Cabinet Minister Margaret Miller stepped down after she said Rankin promoted a staffer who she accused of misogynist behavior. And they're not the only mainstays not in this race. 13 of the 51 members of the House decided not to run, including 10 Liberals. No matter how things play out tonight, there will be a large group of first-time MLAs heading to Province House for the next sitting this fall.
Nova Scotia is not the first province to hold an election during the COVID-19 pandemic. New Brunswick became the first just about a year ago, and so far across the country, every incumbent government that's held an election during the pandemic has won. But it may not be a slam dunk here tonight. Alicia Drouse takes a look back at the month-long campaign.
If the Liberals were hoping for a quiet summer campaign, they didn't really get it. Before it even got underway, leader Iain Rankin was dealing with a controversy after he revealed he was twice charged with drunk driving in the early 2000s. The day the official campaign began, a Liberal candidate dropped out in Dartmouth South. Robin Ingraham initially said she stepped aside for mental health reasons. But in a social media post, she said the Liberals asked her to quit the race over boudoir photos she posted online. And she said the party told her to blame her mental health.
So the public was asked to be forgiving of Iain Rankin for his past encounters with the law, including a conviction. And here you have a situation where a woman candidate had not had any trouble with the law.
The Liberals entered the campaign with a healthy lead in the polls, but both the Progressive Conservatives and NDP have gained ground, with PCs focusing their campaign on rural Nova Scotia.
Getting Nova Scotians access to health care. That's what this campaign is all about.
The NDP, meanwhile, have tried to corner the vote in the Halifax area and Cape Breton.
A vote for the NDP is a vote for permanent rent control, and a vote for permanent rent control is a vote for the NDP.
Political experts say the Liberal campaign lacked a similarly clear message.
The Liberal focus was to run a low-key campaign in the hope that enough Nova Scotians will go to the ballot box and say the current government is good enough.
The Liberals do have the advantage, though, of being the party that led Nova Scotia through the COVID-19 pandemic. However, Rankin has only been leader since February after Premier Stephen McNeil stepped down, and he's been met with protests at a number of campaign stops and accused of avoiding media questions.
Can you tell me why there are no media events for the last 2 days?
No, I don't know why there are no media events for that. I'm not sure that I don't understand that question. They're just like, we're in a campaign. We're like out.
But in the end, it all comes down to ballots cast. And with a summer election, there have been concerns that voter turnout could drop to a historic low. Alicia Drous, Global News, Halifax.
So, as mentioned, political scientist Lori Turnbull is here with us all night. Thank you so much for being with us to break down the results.
Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Yes, it will be fun. The election tonight, Lori, is all about change. Elections are always about change. And as we talked about just before that item from Alicia, there hasn't been change across Canada when governments have held elections during this pandemic. Do you think that will hold tonight?
I don't know. I mean, this is a bit of a different feel for a pandemic election because we haven't had, I don't get the sense here that there's like a palpable sense of a public health threat. We have, I think, 9 active cases of COVID-19. And so I don't think there's a sense that people feel that they haven't been able to actively participate. And also, like, if you're asking voters to make a decision about who they want to lead during an emergency, there's a sensibility to saying, if all other things are equal, we'll stay with what we have. But if we don't feel that we're in the eye of the storm anymore, voters might feel more of a sense that they can make a choice.
Okay, and then talking about change in an election, I mean, we've seen a change in the polling in terms of the projections for this throughout the campaign. What happened through the campaign?
Okay, so I think the lead that Iain Rankin and the Liberals had at the beginning was probably always a bit, that was going to change because he was riding on that kind of, not a high, but a sense that the focus was on him because he's the premier, it's an emergency, the House isn't sitting, he's with Dr. Strang every day. That's a different kind of style of communicating with people than you get yourself thrusted into a campaign where now the opposition leaders are on a kind of similar playing field to you. And so now, as opposed to being kind of in that kind of press conference feel with Dr. Strang, now he's competing. Now other people are challenging him. So that was always going to change, but we'll see how much has changed over the past 30 days later tonight.
Right, and there's been a shift in terms of the way the parties have communicated, in terms of the way the Liberals especially have communicated from the beginning of the campaign to now. We've seen them sort of changing their messaging in terms of starting to talk more about being the party that could lead you through the rest of COVID-19.
Yeah, I think, to be perfectly honest, I think the other two parties, like Houston, has clearly been about healthcare from day one. Gary Burrell and the NDP have been clearly about affordable housing and rent control from day one. It's harder to discern a clearer policy focus for the Liberal Party, which isn't to say they don't have policy focus. It's just that they don't have that one thing that kind of puts them on the map. And I think you and the piece before us was right. They were kind of hoping, I think, that people would just go along and people would not necessarily click in enough to kind of start thinking, oh, do I want another government? And perhaps, they would be able to ride the same wave as other previous election, during a pandemic, incumbents get back in. I'm not sure this time.
We saw that happen in New Brunswick about a year ago. Blaine Higgs ran a very quiet campaign. He just sort of went out and said, we've been doing this, we'd like to continue doing it. Why didn't that seem to work the same way for Iain Rankin?
Yeah, I think for Blaine Higgs, it was a very different situation, right? I think for him, he was looking at an opposition leader in Kevin Vickers who didn't have a seat himself. He was weak, right? And so I think Blaine Higgs kind of read the writing on the wall and thought, I can do this. I can call those three by-elections if I want and keep going in this minority context for another while, or I can just do this. And I think, politically, he made the right call. But Rankin is in a very different situation where he's not the incumbent premier in the same way that Higgs was. He has only been here for a few months, really, right? And so he hasn't had the same time to let Nova Scotians get to know him.
Okay, thanks so much, Lori. We will come back to all of these themes as the night goes on. Let's go now to David Akin. He's our chief political correspondent for Global News, and he's tracking the results all night for us on a pretty nifty map you've got there, David.
On the big screen, the TV screen, and right behind me, here it is. This is the 55 ridings that are up for grabs tonight. That's different, right? 55 ridings in 2017. It was 54 ridings, and here's how things turned out in 2017. I don't need to tell you, red is a Liberal riding, blue is a PC riding, and orange is an NDP riding. Now, when we've got 55 ridings, lots of ridings have had to have their boundaries adjusted. And that means some ridings that were, say, red might now have shifted orange or shifted a little more blue. I want to focus in on 3 that are net bad for Iain Rankin's Liberals. Let's start with one. Chester St. Margaret's. That's tonight. We don't have a result. Sorry, that was 2017. 2017, this was a squeaker of a race. Liberal Hugh McKay won by less than 100 votes. Look at that. 35.5%, 34.4%. Beat an NDP incumbent to win Chester St. Margaret's. Now, Hugh McKay since had some legal issues, stepped out of caucus. He's not running again. Chester St. Margaret's is wide open. But there's a boundary change to Chester St. Margaret's, and I want to show it to you. It's right down here where Peggy's Cove is. I'm going to move that in, blow it up. This is Peggy's Cove, Halifax that away. Okay, 2011, watch closely right on this line. 2021, did you see that chunk go? That chunk is now Timberlea Prospect. That is the riding of the Premier, Iain Rankin. This is Chester St. Margaret's. Get this, all the people who live around here, they tend to vote Liberal. And now they're over in this riding, which means this riding, right, again, we'll go back to Chester St. Margaret's. Let's pull it up a bit. There's Chester, there's St. Margaret's. Guess how they vote in Chester and St. Margaret's? They vote New Democrat. So this riding, which was narrowly red, has shifted orange. Gary Burrell and the NDP should pick that up. Now, I see a little color has popped up on my 2021 map. And you know what that means? We've got our first results, so let's hold everything and zoom right in on, we talked about Gary Burrell, his riding, Halifax Chebucto. One poll is reporting out of 37. This couldn't be earlier, but we love the first result, and it's a lead for Gary Burrell. He's up 10-5. It's kind of like, I don't know, is that a hockey game or are we into a football game at 10-5? 10 votes for Gary Burrell. Jackie Kinley, the Liberal, it's got 5 votes. So that's where we are right now. The very first votes coming in. Anything else? No. I want to talk about one more riding where a riding change puts the Liberal in peril, and that's Tony Ince. Tony Ince in 2017, let's go to Halifax so we can zoom in right there. There's Tony Ince's victory in Cole Harbour, Portland Valley in 2017, 36.9% to 32.9%. So he wins by 4 points. The riding in 2017 was a mix of Liberal, Conservative, and New Democrat voters. Look how it's changed. Again, this is the riding we're looking at. Watch this riding change now. Boom. This is now the new Cole Harbour right there. It's just called Cole Harbour because Tony Ince has lost some of the Portland Estates neighborhoods. They tended to vote Liberal, and he's picked up some neighborhoods here. That's the Willowdale neighborhoods. They tend to vote Conservative. So now Tony Ince in just plain old Cole Harbour, he's got to deal with more Conservative voters. That might help out the PC candidate, Daryl Johnson. So those are just 2 ridings, and there's quite a few actually. Well, I'll give you one quick other one because I think this is kind of fun one. It's up there on the island, up in Cape Breton in 2017. We had right down here in the corner, we had Cape Breton Richmond, won by the PCs, beating Michelle Sampson, very popular cabinet minister, 4-time winner. He loses by a hair. But you know what it's about this riding in 2021? They sawed it off right here. Boom. Now we have a new riding called Richmond. There it is. And we have a new riding called Cape Breton East. Let me tell you about the voters in this riding, the way it works. Right down around here, Port Hawkesbury, they tend to vote Conservative. Over here, Île-Madame, that's where the Liberals are. Then all through here, boy, it's all Conservative. So when we look at what's happening now, Cape Breton East, had it existed in 2017, would have been one of the blowout Conservative wins. They're all voting PC up in the north half, Cape Breton East, Louisbourg, etc. But Richmond now may be more of an easier win for the Liberals if the Liberals in this part of the riding can turn out more than the Conservatives over towards Port Hawkesbury. So that's how some of these riding boundaries turn one riding from, say, red to blue, blue to orange, etc. We're going to keep an eye on these close races all night long, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And I can see there are a couple more results coming in behind you.
Well, what was I talking? Just as I said, they're all going to vote Tory up there in Cape Breton East. Sure enough, boop. No, they're not, Aiken. They're voting somewhere else. One poll is in. Heather Peters is up 13-6. Okay, so this is going to change, I'm thinking, during the night, but we'll see. Cape Breton East is in. Right now, put that in the Liberals leading. And then anything else?
Dartmouth,
that's it.
David?
Dartmouth East. Well, that's Preston. Sorry, we'll get it. There we are. Have to press right on the thing. Dartmouth East, we have the New Democrats ahead. Tyler Colborne, 9-7. Much closer hockey game there. 9-7, one poll in. 9 votes for Colborne, 7 for Tim Hallman, the incumbent. And Tim Hallman won a very close one, too, in 2017. But again, he's dealing with some new... Dartmouth East looks very, very different than its predecessor riding. So right now, Tyler Colborne ahead. So that what does that give us in? If we look at early on, we got... Well, and there we got one of the Lunenburgs just popped in. Lunenburg, Susan Corkum Greek ahead of Allison Smith. Sarah, I know you know that the PCs are very keen on the Lunenburgs, and they think the 2 Lunenburg seats, Lunenburg West, if the PCs can pick up one or both of those, there are Liberal, before we went into this, that might be a sign that Tim Houston and the PCs might be inching their way towards dethroning the Liberals. So we're definitely going to watch the Lunenburgs tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, David. David Aiken, clearly having too much fun with this smart board in Ottawa for us tonight. Okay, this is a pandemic election. Those last 18 months or so has had a different impact on each of us. And so we wanted to hear from some regular Nova Scotians tonight, talking about what their lives have been like through COVID-19 and what they want to see from their future government. Let's bring in Ross Lord now. Ross, introduce us to who you're speaking with tonight.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Yes, these 3 folks have a very strong interest in the outcome, and like us, they're very keen to get more results tonight. Nimat Sobani, who is a small business owner in Halifax, Lydia Hauk, the Executive Director of Students Nova Scotia, and Sandra LeBlanc, who is a continuing care assistant with Tideview Terrace Long-Term Care Home in Digby. Thank you, all 3 of you, for being here at the same time. We really appreciate your insights. I want to start with you, Sandra, and because we're all looking at this through the lens of the pandemic, I want you to tell us as much as you can, about the impact of the pandemic on you and your colleagues.
I would have to say that most of us have had an overwhelming sense of the unknown, an overwhelming sense of fear. Is today going to be the day? Just trying to take things day by day and the changes that came with it.
And there's a lot to talk about in terms of what you might anticipate or at least hope to see from whomever comes out of this in control tonight, or if it does go into tomorrow. What are the sort of things that you think are required to improve conditions for you and your colleagues? And again, these conditions existed before the pandemic, and in some ways they were just worsened.
Right. Long-term care has been struggling for a long time. We need to address some of the issues about retention, attracting new students, staff, and keeping them. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and I hope that we get to revisit this a little bit later. Lydia Hauk, I want to turn to you now. In a broad sense, what has the impact of the pandemic been on the people you represent, who are students?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen across youth and students, there's been a lot of challenges, some of them that already existed that were exacerbated throughout the pandemic. Things like the transition to online learning, challenges around affordability, whether that be educational costs or housing, and beyond that, also employment challenges. I think there's a lot of ways that we've seen mental health and isolation and things like that really be further challenged throughout this process for students and youth, as well as the general population.
And we promised each of you that we would not push you into being partisan or taking sides about who you prefer here in terms of which party. But I am wondering if you anticipate or hope for anything tangible to come out of this tonight that will help students.
Ultimately, what we're really hoping for is just to see students and youth showing up to the polls, and that those numbers are going to be high. Because the one thing we've been saying throughout our Get Out the Vote campaign is that if students and youth want to see their issues prioritized by the government, we need to be showing up to the polls. So ultimately, having a good youth voter turnout this election in itself would be a success from our perspective.
Thank you very much, Lydia Hauk. And Nimat Sobhani, your situation is fascinating as well, because you're a small business owner in Halifax, the Humanity Cafe here on the North End. Tell us what happened during the pandemic to you.
During the pandemic, we were trying to comply by, it's so difficult to say everything. We lost all of our staff right at the beginning, because everyone was being asked to stay away, and there was much needed government assistance to all of those people. But we needed the income, so we kept the business open. And during that time, all the pressure of running the business fell on the shoulders of myself, my brother and partner, and then my wife had to step in. She had never worked in the cafe before in order to pick up the slack. And we plodded right through, and when it got busy, we couldn't get enough staff. And then when we finally had staff, then we had another lockdown and we lost them. So it was very difficult to know what to budget for in terms of staffing, because of the ups and downs of the pandemic. So that was one of the main challenges that we faced. So,
and what's the status of your business now?
We have announced to the public that we are closing, and we're basically doing inventory clearance right now. And towards September, we will be vacating the premises. We just could not justify the long hours and for the partial income that was coming in.
Thank you, and I am sorry to hear that. But let's just say that tonight is about hope in some way. Are there things, or is there something that you're anticipating or hoping to see emerge from tonight that could help you? Because you told me earlier that you have more business to do. You feel like you've got a future ahead of you in business. Are there things that the winning party tonight or the next government can do that will help you have a fighting chance?
Absolutely. I feel that the government of Nova Scotia could really help promote small business, not just to do business locally, but also to give us a leg up when it comes to selling outside of the province. One of the biggest challenges that we faced when we did try to sell things outside the province was the cost of shipping and getting our products to market. And we found that we were really at a huge disadvantage when it came to the big businesses. So small business really should be put on a focus. And we should be able to access programs that would allow us to become competitive at the beginning, to give us a leg up, and then afterwards, then the business itself would be able to stand on its own two legs.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Very well said. Nimat Sobhani, Lydia Hauk, Sandra LeBlanc, thank you so much for your insights and your time. Sarah, it's going to be a fascinating night. No one knows how it's going to turn out. We can't wait to see. And we also can't wait to see how much difference comes out of this for these three folks and for others in Nova Scotia. Back to you.
Okay, thanks so much. That is Ross Lord. He's in Halifax with our panel of Nova Scotians. Want to draw your attention to the bottom of your screen. We have some very early results from Elections Nova Scotia that we want to run through right now. Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley, Larry Harrison, the incumbent, out to an early lead. Just one of 38 polls reporting. So these are very early results here from Elections Nova Scotia. The PC's now leading and elected in 5 ridings. The Liberals in 4, the NDP in 2. Have a look at our next early results. This should be Cole Harbour. Dartmouth, Laurelie Nicol, the former municipal councillor, out to an early lead over the Karina Sanford here. Let's have a look at Kings West. This is another very early result. Again, one of 46 polls, but Emily Lutz is out to an early lead, another municipal councillor running for the Liberals here. And in Queens, this is, again, very early results here. Very few votes being counted so far, but Kim Maslin, the incumbent for the PCs, out to a 53-vote lead here. And Laurie, as of right now, You can see at the ticker on the bottom of our screen, the PCs have just jumped ahead to 6 ridings where they're leading and elected the Liberals back in 5, the NDP in 2. So this is all very early days. We are seeing some incumbents and we're seeing some municipal councillors out to early leads. That's interesting in this race. There are quite a few municipal councillors running.
There's an interesting narrative there around municipal councillors who want to jump into the provincial. And we've also, like kind of on the flip side, because you've also got a federal election going on, there are some provincial who are trying to move federal. Bill Casey's been federal, he's trying to move provincial. So it's interesting to see this kind of political career move from one sphere to another. But yeah, I mean, like you can see how if someone was a municipal councillor, they would have that experience campaigning, they'd have built trust in that riding, you know, so that could be a real asset tonight.
And name recognition counts.
Absolutely. On the ballot. Oh yeah, because especially when there's no incumbent in the provincial riding, it's almost like you bring a sense of incumbency, not quite, but almost, right? In the sense that you built that record, you can run on a record.
Okay, that's something we'll keep watching because there are so many ridings here tonight without incumbents running. But for right now, we're going to take a short break. Stay with us. There's more Decision Nova Scotia 2021 coming up right after this. Welcome back to Decision Nova Scotia 2021. Thanks so much for being with us as we track these election results, and the fine folks at Elections Nova Scotia are counting those ballots as quickly as they can. We have some very early results I want to draw your attention to. So the Progressive Conservatives are now leading or elected in 8 ridings, the Liberals in 7, the NDP in 2. The Liberals, of course, would be looking to get to 28 ridings to win a majority government here tonight. Liberal headquarters is where we find Elizabeth Mccrosson this evening, and I understand, Elizabeth, that you have a guest, Andy Fillmore, standing by with you.
That's right. Halifax MP Andy Fillmore is joining me here as my guest. We're already seeing some people filtering into the room, lots of red shirts, lots of young people. You're one of them, of course.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate that very much.
Well, so you've been on the campaign. You've made a couple of stops with Liberal leader Iain Rankin. Tell me, what do you think is the standout promise of the Liberal Party, something that really separates them from the other parties in this election?
Well, there's no question that the continuity of getting Nova Scotia through the pandemic and what comes next into the recovery and into addressing some of the social concerns that have been laid bare by the pandemic. That is really the strength of the Liberal Party at this point and the strength of Iain Rankin. And when I've been on the doors with candidates, this is what I'm hearing there as well.
Okay, and you're no stranger to this political game, of course, and I'm sure you're aware that the Liberals are running a little bit thin on incumbent MLAs this time. How much do you think that's going to hurt them?
I can speak from my experience in 2015 in the federal election that being thin on incumbency was actually a tremendous strength. This is a chance for the party to renew itself, to build the Liberal Party of the next decade and beyond. So these candidates that we're seeing, fresh ideas, new perspectives, diverse backgrounds, this is actually going to be the new strength of the Liberal Party.
Okay, and we're starting to see some very early election results come in, and those numbers are going up and down, and you're no stranger to that either. Tell me, what's it like as somebody who has run for office, held office, to be watching those results come in on a night like this?
The pitter-patter in your heart is going to be here all night long, and we won't know until the last ballot is counted what the outcome is going to be. I know there's a lot of anticipation, and different candidates from all the parties handle that in different ways. Some are with their families, some are with their campaign teams, some are out for long walks in the woods. But I can say this, that all the parties, or rather all the candidates and all parties have worked extremely hard, and whatever the outcome is tonight, it's what Nova Scotians wanted, and my feeling from the doors is that that's going to be a Liberal government.
All right, well, Halifax MP Andy Fillmore, thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of that pitter-patter energy in the room tonight. We'll just have to wait and see how that dynamic changes as the night goes on. Back to you, Sarah, for now.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Mccrosson is in Halifax for us tonight. She's at Liberal Party headquarters and there with one of the federal Liberal candidates in the federal race, but we won't talk about that race yet. Let's talk about the one we are dealing with tonight. The PCs are now leading and elected in 10 ridings, and one of them is Argyll, where Colton LeBlanc, the incumbent here, is out to a very sizable lead. So far, only 4 of 22 polls reporting in Argyll. Let's take a look now at Pictou West. if we can. This is another PC lead. Carla Mccrosson out to a significant lead here as well. No surprise there. She's the incumbent, and the Pictos are pretty friendly to the PCs in traditional Nova Scotia territory. 4 of 31 polls reporting there. Victoria the Lakes, Nadine Bernard is out to an early lead for the Liberals here over incumbent Keith Bain. So the Progressive Conservatives so far leading and elected in 10 ridings, the Liberals in 7, the NDP in 3rd. Every party tonight trying to get to 28. This is where we would see a majority government. Let's have a look at some more results here really quickly if we can. Places where the Liberals could pick up a seat over the PCs. So an incumbent PC in trouble here in Cape Breton East in very early results. Heather Peters for the Liberals is out to just a 7-vote lead. So again, very early results, 1 of 37 polls reporting here. Chester St. Margaret's, David Aiken talked about this one. It's going to be a riding to watch tonight. Jacob Killowy is out to a 9-vote lead for the Liberals, but they could take this one, and if they did, they'd be feeling pretty good about their chances for this evening. Final result here where the Liberals could pick up from the Progressive Conservatives. This is over in... Oh, pardon me, we don't have any more results. So the PCs are now leading and elected in 12 ridings, the Liberals in 7, the NDP in 3. So this is feeling like positive momentum for the Progressive Conservatives. Let's go to PC headquarters in New Glasgow now. That's where we find Alicia Draus. Alicia.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, energy in the room is certainly building up. Every time that PC number on your screen ticks up, we're getting lots of cheers erupting in the room. So people feeling pretty positive so far tonight. Now, those that I've spoken with say that, this really shows that that message of healthcare is really getting through, really resonating with Nova Scotians. That, of course, was the priority of the PCs throughout this whole campaign. Tim Houston really focused on healthcare. That's been a big issue, especially in rural parts of the province where doctors, it's more difficult to retain and recruit doctors. So that's, again, been their focus. And they say that it's starting to pay off as we see these numbers tick up. Now, of course, they're going to be looking for that majority. So that magic number that you've been talking about of 28, that will require them to get 11 more seats than they did in 2017. So again, lots of energy in this room. There's anticipation is building as we start to get some more of the results trickling in. And next time I'll be talking with some of the fellow campaign members here. Sarah?
Okay, thank you so much, Alicia. Alicia Draus is standing by for us in New Glasgow, monitoring PC party headquarters. Let's head now to Dartmouth. Alexa McLean is at NDP headquarters. This is the final of our party headquarters tonight. Alexa.
Well, Sarah, greetings from the Alderney Landing Theatre in Dartmouth. The excitement is slowly brewing. People are coming in to support and basically keeping their eyes to the results as they come in. But I just wrapped up a phone call with the director, the communications director for the Nova Scotia NDP campaign. He's standing alongside Gary Burrell, the leader, as the results come in tonight. And he gave me a little bit of a rundown about what the election for them was all about. And he said that the sleepy, quote, election that the Liberal Party was hoping for is just not what folks were saying is the case on the doorsteps. Lucas Wyde, the communications director, said that people were very engaged in topics that were basically heightened because of the pandemic, and that's the ongoing need for a lot of healthcare and housing supports. And one area in particular that Wyde says the NDP focused on in terms of health was making sure that mental health care investments weren't just an add-on to the healthcare system, but front and center. He said that a lot of folks were saying the fourth wave for them is going to be more about a mental health break, a rising wave of mental health concerns with the fourth wave, and that's something that the Nova Scotia NTP have focused on in their platform with some same day or healthcare investments on the mental health fronts and making sure that emergency crisis teams for mental health supports are deployed across the province. So that's one area of the NDP platform that Wyde says they're really hoping will resonate with voters, and on making sure that they gain some ground. Well, the first step, Wyde says, is just ensuring that they maintain the 5 seats in the legislature that they had when the writ dropped. And of course, outside of Halifax and Dartmouth, that means Cape Breton needs to be retained as well. So they're hoping that that will be the bare minimum tonight. And then, of course, some other ridings to watch for the NDP are seats that they lost in the last election. Sackville, Cobequid, Steve Craig, PC there. They're hoping to get that back, and Chester St. Margaret's. So things are starting to brew here. Of course, every minute things get more exciting for folks in the room, but we'll certainly be checking in throughout the night tonight. Back to you, Sarah and Lori.
Thanks so much, Alexa. That's Alexa McLean. She's at NDP headquarters in Dartmouth this evening, and the party will certainly be looking for a better result than they're seeing right now. They're only leading and elected in 3 ridings. That means not even holding on to the 5 that they had before dissolution, but it's very early. The results that we have right now are just very, very early. So let's take a look at some of the ridings where the Liberals appear to be in trouble. Glace Bay Dominion, this is a redrawn riding, but John White is out to an early lead over John McCarthy of the Liberals. This was, Glace Bay was the riding for Jeff McClellan before for the Liberals. He squeaked out a win in 2017. Let's take a look at Guysborough now. This is a cabinet minister who is trailing in very early results here as well to a progressive conservative challenger here. Just 14 votes separating the two at this point, and only 1 poll reporting. Kings South, another place where the Liberals are trailing in these very early results. Again, just 7 votes separating Derek Kimball from Keith Irving. And in Kings West as well, this riding is Emily Lutz is now trailing Chris Palmer here, so just 5 votes separating the two of them. And in Lunenburg, David Aiken talked about this being a riding that the Progressive Conservatives had their eye on. Susan Corkum-Greek out to a 5-vote lead over the NDP candidate here. So Suzanne Lonis-Croft appears to be in some trouble here. So Lori, if we're looking at these early results, and again, very early, very slim margins because only a few votes have really been counted, but when you're seeing Liberal cabinet ministers behind, we're seeing the PCs out to a 9-seat lead here, leading an elected in 18 over the Liberals 9. That doesn't feel good if you're in the Liberal camp, I imagine.
No, for sure. I mean, you never know how much those early polls are going to be indicative of the night, right, or are they just indicative of the moment? And I think especially, in an election like this one where there's so many uncertainties, like in terms of who's going to come out to vote, who's going to do mail-in ballot and advance poll and on-the-day ballot, and how will that affect the different, is there a benefit to one party or another for voting a certain way? So I think we are really in an early moment, but at the same time, you want to see, if you're a leader, you want to see that early start look really good for you because it just kind of gets you through the night. And for now, Houston is looking at this thinking, that's what I want. That's where I want to be.
Still 10 more seats to go if they want to get into that majority territory. So the PC's leading and elected in 18 ridings at this point. The Liberals in 9, the NDP in 3. These are very early results from elections in Nova Scotia. Just a handful of votes separating the different candidates in all of these ridings. I want to go back now to David Aiken, who's tracking those results riding by riding for us tonight. David.
Yeah, no, and elections are about change. So right now there's some change happening, right? We know that ridings that were blue are now red, and red is now orange, and so on. Let's take a look at that. This is Halifax right here. This is 2021 Halifax right now. This is not good for the NDP. Let me touch on that. Dartmouth North, there's a change. Susan LeBlanc, the incumbent, is losing to Pam Cooley, but there's just 1 poll in. It's it's a tie game, 13-13. Dartmouth North should be a change. Let's take a look at Dartmouth East. Tyler Colborne is winning 9-7 over Tim Holman. Again, a bit of a change happening there. I want to pull further out, take a look at all of the ridings. Look at what's going on here over in the Annapolis Valley. This, Annapolis, that's Stephen McNeil's old riding. That was the biggest Liberal victory in 2017. It was Stephen McNeil. But right now, with 5 polls in, so we're getting kind of here, it's close, 253 votes to 232. So the PC candidate, Jennifer Ehrenfeld-Poole, leading the Liberal Carmen Carr, no incumbent, as they say. This was Stephen McNeil's old riding. This absolutely should be Liberal by the end of the night, but right now it's in the PC column. You want to talk about the world is upside down? Let's go to Cape Breton, folks. Here's Cape Breton in 2017. Do you see all the blue? Let's look at that one. Keith Bain in 2017. He won by 60%. Look where Keith Bain is tonight. He's not winning, but there's only 5 polls in. He's behind the Liberal, 56% to 32%. I think Keith Bain is not going to drop 30 points. I think Victoria the Lakes by the end of the night comes back on the blue side, but that's kind of strange. And then we talked about the John race. The Johns, this is the one everybody on social media is loving this race. It's the one in Glace Bay Dominion, and we know John is leading. Let's find out which John. There we are. Glace Bay Dominion, it's John White leading. He's ahead of John, who's ahead of John. I kid, but how can you not kid when you've got 4 Johns essentially running in this riding. Glace Bay Dominion, though, look at this. Keep your eye on this. This is tonight. This was 2017. That was red. Glace Bay, Jeff McCullen, as Sarah was saying, that's the incumbent. So again, upside down world. This should remain red tonight, and these should be blue. That's the upside down world we have in Cape Breton. So taking a look at the map right now, 2021. That's right now with a handful of polls in each riding, contrast with 2017. For my money, look at that. The Annapolis Valley, that's really going to be all red, right down to Zach Churchill's riding in Yarmouth. That was another big Liberal win down there. In 2021, yep, there's Zach anchoring things at the bottom, but a lot of blue. On the Eastern Shore, this is an important pickup for the PCs if Greg Morrow can defeat Lloyd Hines. Lloyd Hines in 2017, let's go back. Here we are in in Tracadie, Guysborough, Eastern Shore Tracadie. I'll get it all right there. Lloyd Hines in 2017 won. Look how narrow that was. Just less than 100 votes. Tonight, the PCs are doing better in this territory. They have to pick a riding like this up if Tim Houston wants to be premier. This has to remain in the blue column. Those guys up in Cape Breton, as I say, world's upside down up there, Sarah. It's red's going to be blue before we're done, and blue's going to be red. I'm almost certain. But we're keeping an eye on Glace Bay Dominion, and we're very happy to have all those Johns running for office. Sarah?
It's my favorite riding too. Thanks so much, David. David Aiken standing by in Ottawa with all of those riding by riding results. Here's another race we're watching really closely this evening. I want to take a look now at Cumberland North. Bill Casey out to a 1-vote lead over Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson, who's running as the independent candidate here. You may recall she used to be a progressive conservative. She in fact ran for the leadership against Tim Houston, was booted out of the caucus not so long ago. There's just one poll reporting here so far, so these are very early results, and it, as David has been mentioning, may change through the night. But we do want to follow this race really closely, and that's why we sent our Callum Smith over to Amherst. He's in Cumberland North for us this evening, keeping an eye on this race. Callum.
Good evening, Sarah, from Breakfast at Brittany's here in Amherst. This is where Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson and all of her supporters are watching the results very closely. There's probably 50 plus, maybe 60 people, but as I look back, it looks like more are certainly packing in. Ms. Smith Mccrosson arrived at about 7:10 this evening to, of course, as you can imagine, a round of applause from her supporters. She's been going around introducing herself and greeting and thanking supporters for coming. It's an interesting race, Sarah. It's one vote at this point, obviously very early in the night. Some predict it could go down to the wire between Smith Mccrosson and Bill Casey for the Liberals. But Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson is running as an independent. She's the incumbent, but as you mentioned, kicked out of the Tory caucus back in late June for her role promoting an illegal border blockade, highway blockade, that is. She was kicked out of the PC caucus, sat as an independent for the next couple of weeks before starting this campaign. And running as an independent certainly brings challenges. You don't have, full party support around you. But I asked Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson about that earlier today, and she said she does have support. She says the former Cumberland North PC Riding Association, a lot of those supporters, a lot of those members have came with her and are part of her campaign, even though she's sitting as an independent. So Sarah, will certainly be a tight one to watch tonight, and we'll have our eyes very closely on it here. But for now, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks so much, Callum. That's Callum Smith. He's in Amherst this evening, keeping an eye on Cumberland North, where Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson is looking to hold on to a seat. And speaking of holding on to a seat, let's have a look at some of our first results here this evening in the riding of Argyll. Colton LeBlanc, the incumbent for the Progressive Conservatives, will return to the legislature as MLA. He has a very sizable lead there for the Progressive Conservatives. They are now leading and elected in 23 ridings. Remember, 28 is the number they need to reach in order to get to majority territory. The Liberals trailing with just 9, the NDP with 4. Let's have a look here at the popular vote. This tells a different story. So the Progressive Conservatives with the 50% of the popular vote at this point in the evening. The Liberals 31%, the New Democrats 16%, and then others. So that would encompass our Atlantica Party, our Green Party, our independent candidates, 3% there. So 50% for the PCs. Laurie, I want to talk to you about this right now. I mean, we know in our first past the post system that isn't the way the seat count will shake out necessarily, but 50% at this point in the night, very early results, that's a sizable lead.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, when you think about it, like we think of Nova Scotia having a pretty robust three-party system, and to see one party get 50% of the popular vote, even if it doesn't hold, like if he's in that ballpark by the end of the night, that's significant. That shows that people have, like, if that's the case and it holds, that this election has really shifted toward Tim Houston and the Progressive Conservatives, and it kind of calls into question the robustness of that three-party system that we've seen over the last few elections. And I think obviously it shows, like, with respect to the NDP, are they able to make the kind of gains that they want with the system we have over time? They tend not to. They tend to be disadvantaged by the system we have. And is it possible that people are thinking they don't want to park their vote there because a win is unlikely?
Okay, so very early results here this evening. The Progressive Conservatives out to a pretty significant lead at this point, leading and elected in 23 ridings over the Liberals' 11, 5 for the NDP. We want to go back to PC party headquarters. That's where we find our Alicia Drouse tonight in New Glasgow. Alicia.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, again, excitement really building here. And one thing I should mention, though, is that Tim Houston actually isn't here right now. He won't be here until quite a lot later tonight. He's watching the results privately with his family. In the meantime, the room is filling out with campaign staff. And I am joined tonight with Dave Tarrant, who's a campaign advisor on Houston's campaign. So, Dave, can you tell me a little bit about how you're feeling about everything tonight?
Well, obviously, we're very encouraged by the early results. Still a lot of votes to be counted, still a lot of ridings left to report, so no one's taking anything for granted so far. But certainly it's been a very encouraging show people are still cheering, still very encouraging for our candidates and their teams, so we're very proud of them. So while no one's popping champagne bottles, by stretch of imagination, there's still too many ridings to report, too many votes to be counted. We're happy with how things are going so far.
And of course, we can hear the cheering going on here as every time another riding the PCs take the lead there. What do you, attribute to this, early success anyways right now?
It was an incredible focus from our leader, Tim Houston, all the way down. Understanding that Nova Scotians were very concerned about healthcare, that there's long-standing issues in healthcare with the doctor shortage, with the crisis with ambulance service, and that that while COVID-19, the pandemic, dominated the headlines for the past 18 months, the fact of it is the challenges of healthcare are long-standing. He understands that people deserved better, they wanted to see better, and that focus on healthcare, I think we're seeing that it's connected with Nova Scotians in a very deep and resounding way.
And now, again, the campaign largely focused on health care. In Halifax, in HRM, the NDP really focused on rent control, and we are seeing that they've taken the lead in Dartmouth East, where Tim Hallman is the incumbent. I'm just wondering if there are any concerns about that riding, and if maybe there should have been a bit more of a focus in Halifax.
Well, it's obviously very early in Dartmouth East, and we'll see where the chips fall in terms of that particular riding. Listen, the NDP have made a strong case about affordability and rents in particular. I know our platform spoke about affordability too. It offered different solutions like the better paycheck guarantee. So certainly we had solutions on that. But I think the bigger issue is that urban, rural, Cape Breton, mainland, it doesn't really matter where you are. That the healthcare issue hits every Nova Scotian. And so we weren't going to go to one part of the province and say it's healthcare and then change our message somewhere else. I think the Liberals tried to do that a little bit, and it didn't work as well for them as it should have. Every part of Nova Scotia that Tim Houston went to, there was an issue with healthcare, and every part of Nova Scotia he went to, he had a solution for healthcare. And I think that's what we're seeing tonight.
All right, and I just want to ask you about some of the seats that you are leading in, both Antigonish and Annapolis, both former PC top people, both former Liberal candidates were there. So Randy Delory might be losing his seat there, and Premier Stephen McNeil, who stepped down, so there's no incumbent there. Why do you think those ridings are leaning PC right now?
Well, the same way that we're not going to concede Dartmouth East yet. We're not going to declare victory in those ridings either. But I think what you're seeing is PC candidates performing a lot more strongly than anybody anticipated. And it's worth thinking back, as recently as late May, the PCs were down 28 points in the polls. And for us to be actually in a situation where election night, this far into night, we're leading in the former former Premier McNeil's riding, shows just how effective Tim Houston's strategy, his focus and discipline in providing real solutions for healthcare is resonating with Nova Scotians all across the province.
All right, thank you so much, Dave. So as you guys just heard, the PC is feeling pretty good right now, but again, it's still early. They're not counting any of the chickens before they're fully hatched. I'll send it back to you, Sarah.
Okay, thanks so much, Alicia. Alicia Drouse, live for us tonight in New Glasgow. Lori, we've been listening to the campaign advisor for Tim Houston talk about how their message of healthcare is really resonating. I mean, every party in this election has been talking about healthcare. So with these early results, the PC's out to a lead in 25 ridings, the Liberals trailing with 10. To what extent does the message of the party count, or the leadership of the party?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably both, right? Because obviously healthcare is always a huge issue in this province, in all provinces. But the issues like doctors shortages, nurses shortages, hospital closures, trying to deal with the cost of everything, like we have been talking about the same issues for every election for decades. And it's literally like you can look back at campaign material and it's so close. So it's like, okay, you know, everybody, like it's not the case where somebody can say, I'm going to run on healthcare and I'm going to win. Clearly, there's something about whatever the PCs did, whatever Houston did in this campaign that resonated with people. Clearly, I mean, you know, I shouldn't say clearly, like we'll have to look back at some point to figure out, was there a voter fatigue with the Liberals? Was the pandemic kind of, you know, incumbent return policy that seemed to have happened with all the others didn't happen here? Why was that, right? So like I think there's probably more to it than that, but ultimately like I don't think the healthcare push was enough, right? But I think it must have been leadership too.
What do you mean by voter fatigue?
I mean, I think people, like, understandably will get tired of having the same government, and you know they'll want to try something new. And I think with our parties being not the same, but close together in terms of where they are on the ideological spectrum, yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of overlap between our parties. Although that's not what it looks like right now necessarily, but if we end up with a minority government tonight, I think there's a lot of ways that these parties can work together. And so it means that if voters do feel like they'd like to take something else for a spin, they've got choices.
Okay, and so right now the PC's leading and elected in 25, the Liberals holding at 10, the NDP in 6. I see there's one in the other column. I'm hoping we can figure out where that is, but we'll come back to that in a moment. The NDP here, Lori, tonight, 6 ridings at this point. It's still very early results, but this doesn't really show them making the significant kind of gains that you would hope to see if you were hoping to form government or even opposition.
That's it. I mean, they went into this thing with 5. I don't know how necessarily Gary Burrell defines success in this election for himself, but I think they were probably thinking of double digits for sure. And I think they did a lot of work to push this issue of affordable housing and rent control, and they really focused on areas that had that message would really resonate and be part of people's lives. And so I think if they don't see a return from that, if they don't see that this message that did resonate and the stories they told about Nova Scotians, if that doesn't turn into more seats for them, that's jarring for them. Like that's not just a bad night. That's a kind of existential, what are we doing then? Like what would work with people if not this?
Okay, speaking of existential questions, if the Liberals results here hold, 10 ridings coming from being government, this certainly would not be a good night for Iain Rankin. What does this say about, I guess, his leadership, his campaign that he ran?
I think there'll be a certain amount of kind of looking back and thinking what went wrong, when did we lose this, were we ever going to win this, would any of the other contenders for leadership have done better? A more frightening question, would Stephen McNeil have won this? And maybe, and so you look at that and you think, okay, like what do we want to do then, right? Like if we've got that, like, I mean, if the numbers kind of hold the way they are now in terms of relative terms with the parties, that would put the Liberals in an official opposition capacity. Do they want to do that? Does he want, like, they'd have to, does he want to do that? Do they want to take the party in a different direction? Like it would be kind of, for them, I think they'd have to start to figure out why this happened the way it did. Do they want to build Rankin's leadership, build his brand? Or do they want to say, we're going to do something else?
But think about some of the stumbles that Iain Rankin had in the campaign. I mean, before we even got into this campaign, he's dealing with a controversy, trying to deal with something about his own history, those 2 charges for drunk driving in his own past. And then day 1 of the campaign, a Liberal candidate drops off the ticket and eventually comes out and says she was told to drop off the ticket because of some photos she posted online, her social media presence. These kinds of things have dogged him through the campaign.
Absolutely. And they were all, as we say, unforced errors. These were things that happened that the Liberals could have dealt with better, that they could have avoided altogether. I think in the case of the candidate selection in Dartmouth South, the Liberals know how to select a candidate and run a nomination and get it through, right? And so what was up with having, she's the candidate, now she's not. Now she's saying they told her what to say. Like, what's going on there? That shouldn't happen. And so I think, yeah, like you can look throughout the campaign and say, like, he had a rough start coming out of the gate. He could have handled the DUI thing better. He could have sat down, in front of a camera and said, this is what happened and I've learned a lot from this. But he didn't do that. It was sort of like, we have to pull this out of you, one scrap of information after another kind of thing. And so that doesn't help when you're trying to build momentum around a campaign. And he hasn't had enough time to have Nova Scotians really trust him. He's not Stephen McNeil. In many ways, he's not Stephen McNeil. But he hasn't been there long enough for people to give him the benefit of the doubt. So it was a rough start for him, for sure.
A rough start for him, and a rough start for him so far tonight. Let's go back to David Akin, who's tracking those results. The Liberals leading and elected now, David, in 12 ridings, trailing behind the PCs at 26. Nobody yet getting to 28, though. That's the key number.
That is the key number. But right now, yeah, what David Brabant at PC headquarters is saying is Tim Houston and the PC should be very encouraged by these early results. We're starting to see some polls coming in, and again, looking promising right now for Tim Houston. Not promising for Iain Rankin. Why? What's happening out there? This is 2021. Look at this blue band through mainland Nova Scotia. Forget about Halifax. Look at that blue band through mainland Nova Scotia. 2017, we had a red band from the Annapolis Valley right up to the Eastern Shore. Now 2021, it's crazy close. Annapolis, I mentioned it before, Stephen McNeil's old riding. The Liberals are ahead, but only by 7 points. That should not be that close. That should be a slam dunk, a victory for the Liberals. I mentioned Zach Churchill right down there in Yarmouth. Look at that. It is super close. One vote. Now, mind you, we got 7 polls in. It's going to be a spread here, but Candace Claremont, could she beat Zach Churchill? I mean, we're talking about Iain Rankin, potential leadership. I thought Zach was going to run to replace Stephen McNeil, quite frankly, but yeah, who knows? Right now, he's in a dogfight down there in Yarmouth. Where else are things changing? On the Eastern Shore. This was red last time around. Greg Morrow now beating incumbent Lloyd Hines in Guysborough-Tracadie. Things are changing. 7 polls in. We have almost 800 votes counted. So now we're starting to see some trends. Here's another trend right here. Eastern Shore, the incumbent Kevin Murphy. He's losing in a big way after 3 polls to Kent Smith of the PCs. I'll give you one more shocker, folks. Yeah, we know that this part of the province is generally conservative. Federally, that's Peter MacKay. Cumberland North it's Lenore Zanz right now. Remember, she used to be the NDP MLA. Now she's the Liberal MP running for re-election. I'll try not to confuse them. Here's what I was talking about, the big shocker right here. That's Antigonish, folks. Randy DeLaurie, the, I thought, popular minister in both McNeil's government and Rankin's government, he's running second by a lot. 4 polls of 36 are reporting here, but still we've got, 500-600 votes counted, and Randy DeLaurie is behind in Antigonish. It is all going blue except for Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson in the Northumberland straight ridings. She is ahead of Bill Casey. 5 polls reporting. That is the independent, the other that Sarah was talking about. But right now, the story of the night is outside of Halifax, and we sort of knew this, Tim Houston of the PC is doing what the PC party in Nova Scotia has to do if they're going to win, and they pretty much got to run the table in rural Nova Scotia and in the small centres of Nova Scotia. And so far today, there's another one. I got to point this out. The 2 Lunenburgs. The Lunenburg, I think the PCs thought they had a chance at, but Lunenburg West, my goodness, there you go. It looks pretty good too for Lunenburg West for Becky Druhan. Lots of change happening. Red dropping to blue. Back to you, Sarah. Here we go.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. That whole map seems to be turning blue. So just drawing your attention back to the ticker, the Progressive Conservatives are now leading and elected in 30 ridings. That is into majority territory. Too soon to tell you who your government will be. Of course, these are very early results from Elections Nova Scotia. But the standings as of right now, 30 ridings for the PCs. Liberals leading and elected in 9, the NDP in 7, and Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson in Cumberland North is leading in her own as well. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more results after this. Welcome back to Decision Nova Scotia 2021. All of your election results as Nova Scotians go to their 41st general election. Thanks for joining us as we guide you through everything that's happening this evening. I'm Sarah Ritchie. We want to talk about the results as they've happened so far. It's been an hour since the polls closed, and as of right now, there are early results in. We can tell you, though, that Liberal Cabinet Minister Lloyd Hines will not return to the legislature. In Guysborough-Tracadie, Greg Morrow with the PCs will be the MLA. So this is a big blow to the Liberals, who are now sitting in second place. 12 ridings where they are leading and elected. The PCs leading and elected now in 27. The NDP in 10. Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson, the independent candidate, is leading in her riding of Cumberland North. The PCs need to get to 28 seats, so would any other party, in order to form a majority government. I want to bring back David Aiken. He's tracking all of the results for us. So David, in the last couple of minutes, just before we went to break, the PCs were leading and elected in 30. Now they're back to 27. These are early results. They're going to do a little ping-ponging. Yeah, so look at the numbers in your bottom. Do some math, folks. PCs have 27 and they need 28. Where could they find that? That one independent. Maybe Tim Houston says, hey, Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson, come on back into my caucus, and then he'd have his majority. Seriously, I mean, I wonder if something like that could happen, if they could, make up and patch it up, whatever it might be. There's Cumberland North. Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson, seven polls in. She's got, about 170 vote lead over Bill Casey. Bill Casey, we all know, was a conservative, federally PC, federal Liberal. Now he's a provincial Liberal. I like Bill, he's a good guy, but he's losing right now. We talked at the beginning of the night, Sarah, about those three ridings where a little twist of a little neighborhood coming out here, redraw the map, you end up with a different result. I'm going to check back in on those. One of those was Chester St. Margaret's. I thought this would go NDP. I thought the riding had turned more orange. Folks in Chester, folks up St. Margaret's Bay. If you take a look at this riding, the Conservative strength is usually up here around New Ross, around the Christmas tree farms, everybody knows for Nova Scotia. But this is a surprise that the Conservatives are winning Chester St. Margaret's. There's not a lot of history. You'd probably have to go back to the mid-90s to see Conservatives winning a riding like Chester St. Margaret's. Remember I mentioned this was where the big change was. The Liberal polls move over to Timberlea Prospect. We talked earlier about Cole Harbour, Tony Ince, the incumbent. And I thought that would go more blue because Cole Harbour has now got more neighborhoods down in the Willowdale section that tended to vote blue. But nope, doesn't look like it. In this case, Jerome Lagme, he's ahead. Now 3 polls are in, mind you. Right now it's the NDP, Liberals in second, and Darrell Johnson in third. But if you look at the percentages, it's close. This riding we're going to be watching a little later on tonight. And then there's the one that kept us up all night in 2017. Am I going to get it here? I think I am. Yes. Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank, where in 2017 it was back and forth right until the end of the night. Finally, Stephen McNeil got his majority on this one, but right now it is turning blue. And I mentioned earlier in the night the slight redraw. Some Liberal polls came out and a little bit of some former Conservative polls moved in. Brian Wong is ahead by 10 points. With 5 reporting at this point. So those are some of the ridings where there was some redistricting, some things moved out. Right now, 2 are surprising me. Chester St. Margaret's, wow, that'll be a pickup for the Conservatives. And for Cole Harbour, that's not bad for the NDP. Let's take a closer look at Halifax. We're finally starting to see a lot more Halifax numbers come in. There was a few ridings, Sarah, I think we've touched on this, that closed late. The polls closed late because they opened late, and so there'll be a little slow to report. Here's 2017. This is sort of the HRM in 2017. A lot of red there with a solid orange core. Right now in 2021, orange is spreading out. The red up here is turning blue. Just have the red here. Timberlea Prospect right there. That's the Premier's riding, and he's ahead comfortably. I think he should win. He should win his own riding. That's what I'm talking about. But if we zoom back into Halifax, bear with me a second. Not a bad night for Gary Burrell right now. And in fact, looking at the ticker, oh my gosh, he's tied. Right now, Gary Burrell and the Liberals are tied. Wouldn't that be something? The PCs need 1 vote to form the majority. That might be the independent. And Gary Burrell could easily be the opposition leader. You know what? Here's a question we're going to have. Maybe Lori knows the answer to this, Sarah.
We know how premiers happen in a minority government. They can work out a deal. What happens if you have a tie for the second place party? Who gets to be the leader of the official opposition, with which comes some extra money, extra salary, extra staffing, pride of place in question period? I mean, if you can't finish first, you definitely want to be the number 2 guy. And right now there's a tie, 12-12 Liberals and New Democrats. Great for Gary Burrell, awful right now for Iain Rankin, and obviously terrific for Tim Houston. Sarah?
Thanks so much, David. Lori, this is apparently pop quiz time. So do you know the answer to David's question of who becomes the official opposition leader in this scenario?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I don't think we've ever had a tie in Nova Scotia before. We had that tie in the late 90s between when the Liberals and the NDP, when Robert Chisholm was leader, had 19 apiece. They'd go to if that was the case, they'd have to choose a speaker. I don't think there's something that automatically says it's you or it's you. I don't think that, but I'll try to sort that out.
Okay, we'll look into that. But as of right now, that's no longer a scenario we're looking at here, Lori. We can see on the bottom of our screen the PC is leading and elected in 27 ridings, Liberals 13, NDP 10. So these are very early results. They keep flip-flopping, they keep switching around. But one thing that is remaining pretty consistent, and we've seen this on David's map consistently throughout the night, is that the PCs are really winning in rural Nova Scotia and not in urban Nova Scotia.
Yes, for sure. And obviously that's enough for them to get where they are right now. But at the same time, if Mr. Houston is going to be the premier, then that's going to mean that he's going to have to build some inroads with Metro Halifax, with the ridings that he's not, he hasn't done as well, because that's going to be a huge part of his life as the premier. And so he's going to have to do that work. And I'm sure he knows that. But for sure, that's been his stronghold. That's no surprise for a PC premier, if that's what happens.
Okay, hold that thought, Lori. We're going to come back to this, but we do have some breaking news we want to get to tonight. Global News is projecting a progressive conservative win this evening. Now, it is too close to call at this point. It's too early to say whether the PCs will be able to form a government. There are some very close races, and as we've been talking about, these are still very tight races across the province in many areas. Let's take a look at where they are. These are the tight races that could determine whether Tim Houston and the PCs could form a majority government. So in Clayton Park West, just a 66-vote lead for the Liberal incumbent Rafa Di Costanzo. A very close race, but again, only 3 of 43 polls reporting so far. So not a lot of ballots have been counted yet here so far. Tight races across the province. We are projecting a PC win, but these are some of the places where they are trailing. Hammonds Plains, Lucasville, Ben Jessup, the incumbent Liberal, here is out to a 61-vote lead. Let's head over to Hants East. This is another very tight race where we're watching Michelle Bloy with a 2-vote lead. So again, very early results here. The ballots are still being counted. The PCs are trailing in these ridings. If they can overtake these Liberals in these ridings of Northside Westmount, Hants East, a couple of others, then potentially they could be into majority territory. Murray Ryan, the incumbent, is trailing at this point by 69 votes. Let's have a look now at Yarmouth, another race that is very tight, and as David mentioned, this is not one you would expect to be tight. Zach Churchill, just a 38-vote lead over the PC candidate here. So 15 of 37 polls reporting. Lori, these are early results. These are tight races. The PC's now sitting at 28. That is the magic number, which they want to get to. But until these tight races shake out, we won't know whether they can form a majority government. But you were just talking about if Tim Houston is to become the premier, he needs to make inroads in Halifax, in urban Cape Breton. How does he do that with the opposition leaders?
Okay, so I think first question is whether, if he's to be premier, is he a majority premier or is he a minority? Right. If he's a minority, then he's going to have to work with somebody. And that could be part of how he builds that strategy, right? Like if he's got to work with Gary Burrell, I think in a way that becomes more easy for him to build those inroads because he's got a kind of a working relationship with somebody who's built that trust in the urban areas, and then he can show that cooperation. If he's a majority government premier, I think what he has to do is listen to the ideas that the NDP has put out around affordable housing and rent control, and show that he really understands that, you know, the things that are genuinely, I mean, actually I say that, and affordable housing, rent control, that's an issue across the province, not just in urban areas.
Right.
So, I mean, I think it's just a question of being there, showing he's listening. That will take time.
It's interesting that you bring up affordable housing and rent control, because at this point in the campaign, we've seen the Liberal leader and the PC leader sort of softening their stance. When we went into this campaign, both of them said, no, rent control, not interested in that. Gary Burrell has said he wants rent control from the very beginning. In fact, NDP candidates were out putting sign toppers on their election signs saying a vote for the NDP is a vote for rent control. It seems to be resonating in urban areas especially. So for Tim Houston, in the last couple of days of this campaign, we've heard him start to say, well, our government would study rent control.
Yeah. So that I think, I mean, he's opening a door. He's not committing to it. He's not going to change his, and I think, like, for him, he really wanted to maintain that focus on healthcare, and he probably didn't want to start getting a ton of questions around affordable housing and therefore to sidetrack him from his message. But I think he probably wanted to show some openness, maybe to let some NDP voters kind of float to him if they wanted, but also to show that he's not, completely opposed to the idea and he's open to talking.
And this sort of speaks to our narrow political spectrum in Nova Scotia that you and I have been talking about. Yeah. Tim Houston ran a campaign as a red Tory. What was he trying to sell to people?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was actually one of the more compelling points in his campaign. He made a lot of effort to focus himself on the election in Nova Scotia, to distance himself from Conservatives across the country, other Conservative premiers, and also the federal Conservative landscape and Aaron O'Toole. And I think he did that not in a personal way, but just in order to kind of situate himself in the political spectrum here. I am a red Tory. I believe in a progressive government. I believe that government is here to do something for people. And I think that part of that is a very strong Atlantic Canadian tradition. We are where the McKays, the Crosbys came from, right? And those kinds of ideas that really affected the narrative around progressive conservatism in the country, they are still relevant here. And I think he knows that, and he's identifying with that. I thought that was very smart of him.
Okay, thanks so much, Lori. So the PC is now leading and elected in 33 ridings. The Liberals in second place with 11, the NDP with 9 as these results keep pouring in. The ballots keep getting counted. But Global News is projecting that the Progressive Conservatives will win the most seats this evening. Let's head back to New Glasgow, back to PC party headquarters. That's where we find our Alicia Drouse this evening. Alicia.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, people are feeling good here tonight. Now, you just missed it, but when we did declare that PC wins, the room just erupted in cheers, lots of clapping, lots of hugging. People are feeling good. And so I am joined tonight with Cameron McKean. He's a co-chair of the campaign. So, Cameron, I'm just wondering if you can tell me a little bit about how you're feeling tonight.
We are feeling awesome. 2.5 months ago, the polls had us 28 points behind, and we are about to form government. This is an amazing night. Tim Houston's vision for healthcare, for fixing healthcare, resonated, and this is one of the biggest political. No other party, every other party in COVID has done. Every incumbent party since COVID happened has done better. We're the first party to actually, in a post-COVID world, gain seats and actually form government. It's amazing, and it's a testament to Tim Houston and how his vision for Nova Scotia resonated with the province.
Why do you think it is that healthcare really resonated with Nova Scotians?
Because it's a mess. And the Liberals have left it behind as a mess, and they were trying to hide that fact. And Tim Houston said, we need to invest to fix healthcare, and that's what we're going to do, and we're going to fix it because it's not in the way it should be. And the Liberals were scared to talk about it, and we knew that Nova Scotians were concerned about it. And it's been shown in the results tonight.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. All right, so like I said, big party atmosphere here. People are very excited. They say the hard work of the campaign really paid off. Sarah?
Okay, thanks so much, Alicia. Alicia Drouse is in New Glasgow. She's at PC party headquarters, where understandably they're feeling pretty optimistic so far this evening. Global News projecting a progressive conservative win. But hey, things are still not over. It's too early to say where it will all end up. And we've seen those numbers at the bottom of your screen flip-flopping back and forth. Let's have a look at some of the places, though, where the Liberals are in trouble and the PCs are feeling very good. Anna Ganesh, Randy DeLaurie, the Justice Minister, the former Health Minister. He was Health Minister for a good chunk of the COVID-19 pandemic. He is trailing by a significant margin here. Let's head over to Cole Harbour, another riding where the Liberals are in trouble. Tony Ince, another cabinet minister here, trailing just by 17 votes, though. So these are still really early results from elections in Nova Scotia. Keep that in mind as we look at these results. Fairview Clayton Park, another riding where the incumbent, the cabinet minister, Patricia Arab, is trailing, but this time to the NDP. Lori, this one is interesting. Fairview-Clayton Park is one of those ridings that I know the NDP was looking really closely at, and this is a riding where they were talking about rent control. This has been their message through the whole campaign. We just heard, the campaign co-chair for the PCs talking about how healthcare really resonated with people. But this riding of Fairview-Clayton Park, there are so many renters in this riding. No surprise then, perhaps, that rent control seems to have resonated there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's a riding where the NDP would have expected to be able to talk directly to people about what they're living and be able to have that message, really be kind of build some trust on that. But at the same time, regardless of how well a message resonates, to defeat a cabinet minister is a big deal, and so I don't think it's just about the messaging, which is really important. And it's not just, it's that Gary Burrell built the trust and the candidate built the trust to be able to unseat a cabinet minister, it looks like. And so that's a significant thing.
And there are a couple of ridings where this looks to be the case. So it's still early. It's still too close to call. The Progressive Conservatives now leading and elected in 30 ridings. The Liberals trailing at 14. NDP have 9. So we want to go back to Liberal Party headquarters where, of course, losing cabinet ministers is not going to be feeling good. Elizabeth McSheffrey is standing by there. Elizabeth.
Hi, Sarah. Well, I'm hearing some of what's happening at the PC party headquarters, and I can tell you that is not what's happening here. This room is only about a quarter full. There's about as many guests here as there are journalists, and there's not a lot of hooting. There's not a lot of hollering. I don't know if that's because of the PC numbers rising that we're starting to see, those early numbers, or whether it's just the nature of the crowd that's here. But as you say, it's always tough when you start to lose cabinet ministers, when you see those numbers going down. And, Iain Rankin, he ran a campaign of confidence in the track record. He had the benefit of running a campaign on quote-unquote proven leadership as the incumbent. So it's not clear whether that's some of the issue here, whether it was the attraction to some of the other party promises, or whether it was any particular issue taken with the campaign that he did run. But certainly all the eyes here are glued to the screens as the riding numbers are counted. We're expecting more people to filter in as the night goes on. We're expecting to have more guests for you as well. But I'll say again, we're not expecting to actually see the Liberal leader, Iain Rankin himself, here until it's about time to make his speech. He is watching these results come in from afar. And the only type of energy we're seeing here from this crowd tonight is when we see Iain Rankin himself on that screen. So we'll certainly have more updates for you as the night goes on. But for now, back to you in the studio.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. That is Elizabeth McSheffrey at a subdued Liberal Party headquarters in Halifax. So the PCs now leading and elected in 30 ridings, the Liberals trailing at 13. Here's the reason we're not calling this for sure a government for the Progressive Conservatives. There are 21 races across the province right now that are within 100 votes. So David Aiken, you've been watching these numbers and you've been watching the colors on your board flip back and forth. The ballots are still being counted. Things are still too early and too close in some of these races.
Yeah, in fact, let me run through a couple of races which I think could flip and flop. That said, and there we go, PCs have just dropped down to 29 as something else has just changed. We're talking about cabinet ministers, and if we look at the map, this is this year, look at the south end of this province. This is largely where French-speaking Nova Scotians live, down in Yarmouth, Digby, etc. There's Zach Churchill's riding. Now, let me get that up. Zach Churchill is behind right now, but look how close this is, 46.7% to 46.1%. Almost 3/4 of the polls are counted. Now, Zach Churchill's an experienced politician. He's been around the block. The last polls to come in a night will typically be the advance polls. There was a lot of advance voting. So those advance polls are big, thick boxes with all the advance polls. And if you're an experienced politician like Zach Churchill, you have probably been working hard to get the advance out. I always give a little bonus when I'm thinking about election nights to the incumbent, particularly an experienced one, to come in right at the end of the night with a big push in those advance polls. Will that be Zach Churchill enough to put that riding back in the red? And if that goes back in the red, that would reduce the PC number back down 1. But there's always a but. Let's take a look at the other end of the province, Cape Breton. This is Northside Westmount right here. Can I zoom in on that? I might as well. Right there. Right, Northside Westmount. Right now, Fred Tilley is leading by a little bit, 28 to 44 coming in. I want to show you Northside Westmount in 2017. Here it is. This was Eddie Orrell's old riding. He won by 64%. Do we think it's likely that we had 64% vote PC 4 years ago and now they're going to lose? I don't think it is. I think this is the kind of riding, this is 2021 right now, it's still in the red column. Right now, Murray Ryan comes up and beats Fred Tilley. That would be my expectation. So Zach Churchill might turn it around for the red team at one end of the province. At the other end of the province, here's a riding like Northside Westmount, which may keep the PCs sort of up above water. We talked earlier as well, another riding that has changed since we last looked in on it. Let's go to Halifax. There's Cole Harbour, right? I was saying that Cole Harbour had turned more blue from the previous sort of iteration, and that's helping Daryl Johnson. But look at these numbers, 33.5, 33.2, 32. This is a real tight three-way race. We'll probably be counting Cole Harbour votes tomorrow. I would not be surprised if this riding was not able to be declared tonight. We do know Elections Nova Scotia is not going to keep their counters up all night long. Probably going to send them home around midnight if there's still stuff to count, and there may be in Cole Harbour. So those are just a few ridings, and sure enough, sometimes I impress myself. Zach Churchill has just done it. There he goes. He's back up on top in Yarmouth. So there's a riding that goes back into the things. Did anything happen up there in Cape Breton? No, it's still there. There it is. And what's going on with the three Johns? We should check in on that. Yep. It's now John Morgan. I don't think has John Morgan been leading up there yet? John hasn't, right. It's John the Liberal who has not yet been the John in front. John Morgan leading in Glace Bay Dominion right now. So there we go. I mean, it's looking, it's looking 28. It's looking pretty close for Tim Houston to get that majority. And yes, you're absolutely right. The reason we cannot declare a majority government is because there's going to be some really close races. And I mentioned Yarmouth in particular, that could go either way. And we could be counting tomorrow to determine majority or minority.
Okay, don't curse us with that, David. 28 is where the PCs are sitting right now. Here's one riding they won't win. Cumberland North, David, independent candidate Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson has been elected here. So she defeats Bill Casey. This is an independent candidate, though. It's unusual, David, for an independent to win, but she had a lot of support from the PCs.
Yeah, and you know what? It's kind of interesting because Bill Casey won as an independent. Remember that? He quit Stephen Harper's government. He didn't like a budget that the Harper government passed. He thought it was bad for Nova Scotia. He quit and then ran and won as an independent and running in the federal riding of what was then Cumberland North. So the folks in that part of the province happy to do something with independents. Independents in this particular guise tend to win once. You know, they like the idea you were a rebel, that's fine, you get one for that, and then it sort of reverts back to party form. So it's just a very interesting now political calculus in Province House when, you know, Tim Houston needs a vote, or he might need one vote for that majority, and it's the woman he kicked out of caucus, could be that particular vote that he needs. We'll see.
Yeah, it could make things interesting, absolutely. Thanks so much, David. David Aiken with the Smart Board for us in Ottawa. We want to check in with some of you, more of how you are feeling about the results so far. Let's go back to Ross Lord. He's standing by with the panel.
Thank you, Sarah. I just keep looking, sort of obsessing and staring at that 28 number, which is just enough for a majority. But as you say, that will likely bounce around a bit through the evening. I do want to go back to our panelists, Nimat Subani, Lydia Hauk, and Sandra LeBlanc. And Sandra, I want to start with you because I'm looking through some of the many healthcare promises from the parties. The PCs cast a really wide net on healthcare, as we all know, and they hammered the Liberals, it looks like, with some success. if we can presume that the PCs will have some, if not perhaps a lot of control over what happens in this province, one of their promises, along with doctors, nurses, is restoring a training grant for continuing care assistants to fund half of tuition costs in exchange for staying in Nova Scotia for 2 years. I'm wondering if that, or if there are any other measures here that you think might make a difference in your working conditions and in healthcare overall.
Cool. Well, I think the incentive is great. I think that there has to be some work when it comes to making the field more attractive. I think there's a lot of negative I don't know how quite to phrase it. A lot of what you read is negative when it comes to long-term care. You don't hear a lot of the good things that happen. During COVID, there was great teamwork. Everybody worked together to get through it. You don't hear those stories. You hear a lot of the negative aspects of what happened. There needs to be an advocate for change. We need to look at things differently. We need to start at the beginning and find out what the problems are. It's more than just money. We need to change a lot of things about long-term care.
Yeah, and it's not just, as you said, money and promises. It's, I guess, public awareness about what you do, and maybe getting leverage through the public in terms of trying to find a way to improve working conditions, for instance, and improve care for your residents.
I think a lot of healthcare workers are worried that it's become just an election issue. Some are afraid of what's going to happen afterwards. But what I would like to say is that long-term care is everybody's issue. The great majority of people will have to deal with long-term care in the future, whether it be their mother, their father, their spouse, themselves. So I know where I was 18 years ago when I started, and I know where we are now, and I'm fearful for where we're going to be in the future. And we need to take care of that so that we have a good place to go in the future.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, thank you. And it's not easy to talk about. It's emotional. And it's not easy to be optimistic either, because there are factors beyond your control and beyond everyone's control right now that are influencing things greatly. I want to shift over to NEMAT for a second. We talked about the future of healthcare, the future of business, and hopefully you're part of it, as the economy continues presumably to reopen and to grow again. What are the kind of things, in addition to you're talking about shipping costs and exporting, what are the kind of things or kind of conditions that you need to see created in order for that reopening to happen? And maybe, the government that emerges tonight can have some input on that.
Well, Ross, the numbers, I think these are not new to the people. We have close to 29,000 small businesses in Nova Scotia, employing almost 98% of the workforce. That's a lot of people employed by small business. I think that deserves an entire department, if not an entire ministry, dedicated to it. And that would then really propel Nova Scotia, I think, into a leading position within Canada and within North America. We are one of the best places to live in North America, and then people are beginning to discover that. You're beginning to see more and more people coming here, and we really need to improve the ability of entrepreneurs to be able to take that idea and run with it. And nothing better than an actual ministry or a department dedicated to small business to move that forward. If I were to end with one thing, that would be it, really.
Thank you very much, Neemat Sabani. Lydia Hauk, we talked earlier, and I found it interesting. You were saying that the timing of this election in August made it challenging to engage students. What do you mean by that? I think we're having some problems hearing Lydia Houck. I want to wrap it up, unless we can get Lydia back here momentarily. I am going to wrap it up by saying thank you to each of you, Lydia Houck, Nimat Sabani, Sandra LeBlanc, for sharing your insights. It's important that we dip into these issues as we go through the play-by-play. Are you there now, Lydia? You are there, but I think we still cannot hear you. Sorry about that. Sarah, that's, I hope, some insight into some of the folks that have a strong interest in this. Obviously, there are a lot of issues to cover. We'll get back to some of the others with a different group of panelists here in a little while. I'll put it back to you, and we'll see where the standings are now.
Okay, thanks so much, Ross. That is Ross Lord. He's standing by with our panel this evening. PC is now leading and elected in 29 ridings, creeping into safe majority territory, but there are a lot of really close races. Here are some that are not so close. Let's check in on the leaders. Tim Houston is going to be elected in Pictou East. No surprise there. Let's take a look at where Iain Rankin ended up in Timberlea Prospect. He is also going back to the legislature, a pretty good margin of the vote there for him as well. So all these two leaders, at least, will head back to the legislature. Gary Burrell, pretty narrow lead here at this point, but just 2 of 37 polls reporting in Halifax, Chebucto. So the leaders at this point out to a lead in each of their seats. The PCs out to a lead in 30 ridings, very close ridings across the province. So we will continue to watch to see whether the Progressive Conservatives can stay in majority territory. Stay with us. We'll have much more results after this. Welcome back to Decision Nova Scotia 2021. This 41st general election in Nova Scotia appears to be leaning to the Progressive Conservatives, who are now leading and elected in 29 ridings. 28 is the number of seats they would need to form a majority government. There are still a lot of races very close. Let's have a look at some of the races where the Progressive Conservatives are leading in formerly Liberal seats. So Antigonish, an incumbent cabinet minister, Randy Delory, is trailing by a wide margin here. Michelle Thompson is elected. She will be the MLA. Let's head over to Guysborough-Tracadie. This is another cabinet seat. Lloyd Hines trailing by a very wide margin here as well, and so he will not return to the legislature. So 2 cabinet ministers down so far. Let's head over to Kings West. This is a seat the Liberals were hoping to hold on to. Formerly Leo Glavine's seat. Emily Lutz, a strong candidate, a former municipal councillor. She is trailing by 346 votes at this point. Lunenburg, another seat where the Liberals really needed to win. So their cabinet ministers are not looking very good tonight. Susan Corkum-Greek has a 75-vote lead over Suzanne Lonis-Croft. And Yarmouth, another cabinet minister who was hoping to return to the legislature, Zach Churchill, just has a 20-vote lead over Candice Claremont. So Laurie Turnbull, when you see cabinet ministers going down, particularly in a race like this one, where Iain Rankin didn't come into this race with a lot of incumbents, and cabinet ministers are falling, where does this leave him?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, there was a number of ministers who had been with McNeil since the beginning who said they're not going to go ahead.
Right.
And so, you know, some of them decided to go. But at the same time, I think, you know, in an ideal world, Rankin would have wanted some of those ministers to be able to go forward. Whether he formed government or not, it would have been good to have that experience. And because, you know, whatever he's going to have is going to have, like his caucus will have people who have no experience in the House. It's really good to have people who have that experience. And if you're in opposition, you need to know, like, how to really work the rules and understand how committees work and be able to perform that accountability function. It's really hard. And so if you've got people who have the experience in the legislature, it can be a huge asset to you. This looks like when you see ministers falling, it seems more of a real rejection of the government.
Right.
And so that doesn't feel great.
And to use a sports analogy, this is sort of looking like, at this point in the night at least, a Liberal rebuilding period.
Oh, I think so. And you know, that sometimes for a political party, when you've got that opportunity to rebuild, it's not necessarily a bad thing. That's easy for me to say, sitting here and not sitting there. But it's it's an opportunity for them to say, okay, you know, like, what do we want to do? We can rebuild. We can sort of get out of the business of government in a kind of we're the government way, and focus a little bit more on their own, you know, how do they want to rebuild and recast themselves? What do they want in the next leader? How do they want to organize themselves and recruit new supporters so that they're, you know, in 2 elections time, they're able to form government again? And usually that's what we do in Nova Scotia. We go back and forth between the PCs and the Liberals, and they each do 2 turns and then throw it back to the other. Right. And so it's not catastrophic, right? Like, I mean, the Liberals have won back-to-back governments, and, you know, it's just in this context of COVID, when all the other incumbents have been returned, this is an anomaly for sure.
Well, and we're talking about rebuilding. I mean, this is a Liberal Party whose longtime leader stepped down not so long ago. Iain Rankin came in. He said, I'm a young leader. I've got different priorities. He tried to sort of rebrand from the McNeil Liberals. What do you think happened here? It doesn't seem to have stuck.
Yeah, I mean, I think a few things happened. One thing is it's hard to get that attention around rebuilding and rebranding the party during COVID. And after McNeil stepped down and Rankin came in, I think a lot of the messaging he was putting out and you know, fine, we need to do this, but around green growth, green economy, those are, you know, in many ways, medium-term measures that don't necessarily take hold of a brand right away. And I think, you know, some of the decisions he made right up front were kind of counterintuitive to the brand that he said he was putting out. And so that would have undermined him a bit. Then we ended up with another lockdown. That was, you know, so like, I think it was hard, you know, to be honest, it was hard for him to kind of get there. And he hasn't had enough time, I don't think, to really remake the party in his own image after McNeil had been there since 2007.
Okay, so not a good night for Iain Rankin so far. A better night at PC Party headquarters in New Glasgow. That's where we find Alicia Draus. Alicia.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, of course, the energy here is continuing to build. Tim Houston's still not in the House yet. He's expected within the hour, but I am joined with campaign co-chair Tara Miller, and we're just going to talk a little bit about this campaign where that really, you know, the PCs obviously did really well over the last 30 days, but of course, this campaign was going on a lot longer, a lot more work than just the past 30 days. Tell me about all the work that it took to get here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alicia. So this, you're exactly right. A campaign is executed over a 30-day period, but the work that's gone into this campaign has been long-standing, and that is evidenced by Tim's commitment to healthcare and the 3 healthcare plans he released a year ago. And so that set the foundation for the balance of the campaign. And the campaign was about selling and sharing Tim's vision for healthcare, better healthcare for Nova Scotians across the province.
And now that's obviously a message that resonated with a lot of Nova Scotians. I do want to ask you, though, in the, you know, urban Halifax, we're not quite seeing the same strength with the PC party as we are elsewhere in the province. Why do you think maybe that message wasn't quite resonating in those urban areas?
Well, we don't have the final results yet, but I will say that the messages that we've been receiving is, obviously, healthcare is not a rural issue. It is not a suburban issue. It is not a metro issue. It is a province-wide issue. And maybe it's felt more acutely in areas outside of metro where there's easier perceived access, but we know from the story last week of an 86-year-old gentleman who lay in his driveway in Dartmouth for 3 hours that this is a pervasive province-wide problem, and that is why the campaign focused in every riding to share that vision of better hope and health care for Nova Scotians.
And now the party, of course, is inching closer to that 28 seats, that majority, but we still don't know for sure whether or not that's going to happen. I'm just wondering if you can paint a little bit of picture about where the party goes from here if you guys don't get that majority.
Well, it's clear that Tim Houston will be the next Premier of Nova Scotia. That part is, the message has been received loud and clear. There's still lots of ballots that have to be counted, lots of advance poll ballots. We're very confident that he will be the Premier, and what that looks like will be for another day. Today we're going to focus on seeing how things shake out in all the remaining ridings, and seeing how our candidates across the province are doing, cheering them on and their campaign teams who have all worked so hard in their individual ridings.
And is there anything the party can take away again from, you know, seeing the results in urban Halifax where, you know, the NDP really ran on rent control as their main issue? Is that something that the party might kind of take a look at as many Nova Scotians are saying that's an issue for them?
Healthcare will be our #1 priority moving forward, but obviously healthcare is interconnected with all facets of society. Housing, affordability, the economy, and certainly the platform that Tim ran on had elements for all of those items, but the focus obviously was on the healthcare and better healthcare for Nova Scotians.
All right, and you've been part of this team for quite a long time, for over a year now, you said.
Yeah.
Just wondering how you're feeling tonight.
I'm pretty happy. We're all, you've been here, you've heard the cheers, the jubilant nature of everyone. I mean, this is a collective win under Tim's leadership. There are a lot of people in this room and in 55 ridings across the province that have put their summers on hold. They haven't gone to the cottage. They weren't at the beach. They have worked so hard because they believed in Tim. They believed in his path forward, this vision for healthcare. And it's beautiful and so exciting to see this all come together tonight with Nova Scotians giving us their vote. We're very grateful.
All right, thank you so much, Tara. All right, so there you have it again. The PC focus on healthcare seems to be really resonating with Nova Scotians, as we're seeing in the results. And just once again, we are expecting Tim Houston to show up within the hour, so we will hear from him at that point. Sarah?
Thanks so much, Alicia. Alicia Drous is live for us tonight in New Glasgow at PC Party headquarters, where you did see a lot of hugging and cheering, and they were pretty excited for us to project a progressive Conservative win. But we just saw on the ticker below, as Alicia was talking, that the PCs dropped back to 27 ridings where they are leading and elected. There are a lot of really tight races here tonight. 11 ridings so far where things are less than 100 votes apart. Sackville-Cobequid is one of those. Laura Fothrop is 21 votes ahead of Steve Craig, the incumbent there. So the PCs will be watching that one closely. Let's head over to Northside Westmount. This is another very close riding. The Liberals with a 621, well, it's a little less close, 621 vote lead over Murray Ryan, the incumbent. So the PCs don't appear to be doing so well here. Heading to Clare now, other side of the province. The Liberals are out to a 4-vote lead, 17 of 20 polls reporting. So this one is going to come down to the wire. We will keep a close eye on Clare to see what happens. And Yarmouth, a cabinet minister's seat, which should be a runaway if you are going to form government again. Zach Churchill, 21 votes ahead of the Progressive Conservative candidate here. Bedford South, this is a new riding, so no incumbent here. Let's have a look at how close things are. Braden Clark is 3 votes ahead of Surah Haddad. 12 of 37 polls reporting here. So, Lori, lots of polls still to come in, lots of ballots still to be counted. Tara Miller was talking about this, but we've got 11 races that are within 100 votes, 11 out of 55. We have the PCs leading and elected in 27. It's just too close to call anything at this point.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we're starting to see a picture emerge, I think. But at the same time, it's amazing how close some of these are. And it's not totally surprising. I mean, given, I think, we'll find out more about this later, but you know, how we weren't really sure who would show up to the polls, how many people, what voter turnout will be. For a long time during the campaign, it felt like people weren't engaged at all. And it was hard to get a sense of where the momentum was and whether any party was sort of picking it up more than anybody else. But I think we're seeing too, like, it'll be interesting to do the analysis around how many times the party came second. And you know how close the races were in different ridings, because it's going to feel nasty to have lost a riding by just a small margin and think, oh, you know, if we had done one more thing, would it have made a difference? Like, but it shows just how close the parties are.
And to your point there, Lori, I had a conversation with a friend who's been in the political realm in Nova Scotia for quite some time, about halfway through the campaign, and she said, you know, this doesn't really feel like a change election. You can kind of feel that by this point in the campaign, and yet here we are with what looks to be a pretty strong change election. Just shifted.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes when I think of a change election, I think of like federally 2015. When there was a palpable sense of anybody but Harper.
Right.
And so the question was really, okay, if you're going to vote for Harper, then you're going to vote for him. But if you're not, then who are you going to pick to replace him? Mm-hmm. And midway through the campaign, or maybe even a little before that, it was clear that Trudeau was the change candidate. And so then from then on, he just picked up steam right until Election Day. And he ended up with a majority. This has never had that feel at all. It's never had you know, regardless of how Rankin's campaign may have gone, there's never been a sense of like anybody but Rankin. Like, not at all, right? This has been very much a kind of quiet, you know, door knocking kind of campaign. And so it might be why, like, we weren't quite sure what was going to happen, because we don't poll as much in Nova Scotia as we do at the federal level. Like, there wasn't as much, you know, in terms of indicators of how this was going to go. So it's a fun election night. It's a,
yeah,
you know,
it's fun for us.
Yeah.
Not so fun for Iain Rankin and the Liberals, though, Lori. And so when you look at where they were heading into this thing, they had a sizable lead. This was sort of Iain Rankin's election to lose, and it looks like he's done that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when this first kind of, like when it was first called, his lead was substantial. I mean, his his own approval rating and his government's approval rating were both well over 50% and yards ahead of and it was like Houston and Burrell were in a tie way back. And so there was no sense at first that this was going to be a change election at all, or there would be any kind of threat to Rankin's continuation. But it shows how much campaigns matter. And I mean, I think I don't think personally that the leaders' debates, the roundtable, I don't think they were change moments in the campaign. I think this was really a ground game. And, Houston and Burrell worked really hard. Rankin did too. But I mean, I think enough people were open to doing something different. And again, could have been the back-to-back Liberal governments. Could have been the sense that COVID is not the kind of emergency that it was before. And so people are willing to go another way.
Okay, let's head to Liberal Party headquarters. Test the mood in the room. Elizabeth McSheffrey is there in Halifax for us tonight.
Hi, Sarah. Well, things are finally starting to pick up in terms of the energy level here. The room is starting to fill up. We're starting to hear some rounds of applause as we see Liberal candidates leading or elected in a few more ridings. I'm joined here now by my guest, Diana Whelan, a former Liberal Premier of the province. My first question for you, Diana, is how are you feeling tonight as we're seeing this early PC lead?
Well, I'm certainly worried, I'm concerned, and, disappointed for the early results. But I don't think it's over yet. I've seen many elections where the advanced polls and the people who voted early make all the difference. And in these tight races that we're looking at, which quite a number of them are, I think this could really turn the tables. I think that it may end up better for the Liberals than we apparently are seeing now.
Well, certainly they are early results and many more ballots to be counted. But you were also a finance minister in your time in government, so I want to talk a little bit about that. Now, the Liberals are coming from a government that said it wants to balance the budget by 2025, and that's not the message that we heard from the PCs or the NDP, which is that they want to spend what it takes to fix major issues like the healthcare system. Do you think that approach from the Liberals just confused people a little bit? It's not the typical spending approach.
No, I don't think so. What's confusing is what the Conservatives have promised, to fix healthcare with $1 billion investment or some enormous investment. That's not telling us the plan, and money alone is not going to get us out of this problem. Healthcare is so enormous. It's the biggest spending item in the provincial budget, and it grows, quickly. It tends to overwhelm other spending. But it's very difficult to fix it just with an infusion of money. That's not going to just suddenly get you more doctors, because doctors are in short supply everywhere. They're in short supply across Canada. We need to be more innovative. We need to find other ways to meet the needs of the public, serve the public with nurse practitioners, advanced paramedics, helping to supplement the time and resources we have. And I think the Liberals had really made, tremendous strides, recruiting internationally and so on, so that, there are better ways to do it. It's not just about money. I think we're going to find that to be an empty, hollow promise, and it's, really, in fact, if they form government, we're going to be disappointed.
Well, you've been watching politics in this province for a long time now, and I wanted to ask as well, we know how rare it is to secure a third mandate in a government. Are you really surprised by what's happening?
Well, I am, because I'm a tremendous supporter of Iain Rankin, and I know the kind of person he is. I know how smart he is. I know how much he cares about this province, and I also felt he had the strongest platform of any of the other leaders. It was the most balanced platform. I see him as really the hope for our future in Nova Scotia. He cares about the environment. He's the first to say we have a climate crisis, we need to take action. And he took action in the short time he was Premier. So I want to see more of that. And I think it's a loss if we don't have that opportunity for Iain Rankin as our Premier. So I'm watching this, feeling that a lot is at stake, because we had a very progressive platform and way forward. So I'm still hopeful. I'm hopeful for many of these seats that are still very much in play.
And my last question for you before I let you go, there's been so much talk about the campaigns tonight. After this is all said and done, whatever the result is, can you just tell me a little bit more about the kinds of conversations that happen afterward about, what we did well, where we went wrong, how we can improve for next time? What does that look like?
Well, I think there's always an analysis done. Every party does that to see what's working. And there'll be changes, but every election is different. So I think that yes, we will definitely have a look at what happened. We know, again, as you said, it's difficult to go into an election having had two majorities, and a difficult change, even with a new leader, even with new priorities. It's hard sometimes to make that transition. We also had many of our ministers and incumbents who didn't reoffer, and that is a disadvantage as well. But I understand that because I retired in 2017, and that's natural progression. And I was excited and am excited by some of the young people and the energy and change that we had put forward in a slate of candidates that are wonderful. So I know some of them will be joining the new caucus, and I just hope that there will be many more before the night is over.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to leave it there for now. But as you did hear, there's lots of applause and energy happening in the room right now. And you've heard the message from my guest here, Diana Whalen. Do not count us out. That's what the Liberals are saying right now. So back to you in the studio, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Elizabeth McSheffrey is at Liberal Party headquarters for us tonight. Still a lot of close races, still a lot of votes to be counted. Let's have a look at where the popular vote stands so far this evening. And this is not so close. So, Lori, Progressive Conservatives out at a lead with 42%. We saw them earlier at 50%. That was pretty significant. This is getting back toward what you were talking about, that strong three-party system in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really unusual actually to see a party win like 50% or more of the popular vote, particularly when you've got like these three parties that are very competitive. But yeah, you're seeing here clearly Houston as a lead. He's managed to connect with a plurality of voters in Nova Scotia, but still a strong showing, honestly, for both the Liberal and the NDP. It'll be interesting to see by the end of the night how, where this all finalizes and how much the parties, their share of the popular vote and the share of seats in the House of Commons matches. Because that's one of the, the issues that the NDP have always had, is that they can get votes, but it doesn't necessarily translate into seats for them, which can be a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that people vote strategically and they don't necessarily want to vote for someone they think is not going to win.
Okay, a look at some of the places where the Progressive Conservatives look to be picking up seats. So, Antigonish, Michelle Thompson will be the MLA there, unseating Randy DeLaurie, the Justice Minister, former Health Minister, another minister in trouble over in Guysborough, I should say. Lloyd Hines will not return to the legislature. Greg Morrow will be MLA for Guysborough Tracadie. In Kings South, the Progressive Conservatives also potentially picking up a seat here. This is a close one. Keith Irving, the incumbent here, is just 159 votes ahead with 9 polls still to report. Over in Kings West, the PC incumbent, there was no incumbent here. Leo Glavine was the incumbent. This is what I'm trying to say. Chris Palmer is out to a 498 vote lead. So there are places where things are very close. There are places where things are a little less close, and the PCs are picking up seats. They have 28 ridings where they are now leading and elected. The Liberals trailing with 16, the NDP with 10. We're going to take a short break. Back with more after this. Welcome back to Decision Nova Scotia 2021. Thank you so much for joining us as we guide you through the results of this provincial election. I'm Sarah Ritchie. Global News is projecting that the Progressive Conservatives will win the most seats tonight. They are currently leading in 28 ridings. Things are very close. We want to head over now to Cumberland North. Callum Smith is in Amherst for us tonight, and he is standing by with a guest. Callum.
Thanks, Sarah. Here at the Legion in Amherst with Mr. Bill Casey. Mr. Casey, not the result you wanted. I guess, can you try to give us a sense of what's going through your mind right now?
Well, look, I've won some, I've lost some. Winning's better. I congratulate Elizabeth. It's not easy to win as an independent. She did a good job. She works hard, and she won. And I had a great team. I think we conducted a great campaign. I'm so proud of them all, and they're a great bunch, and we're quite happy, although we didn't win. But again, the people have spoken. I absolutely respect democracy, and I'm so proud of all the people that worked on my team. But I want to thank all the volunteers that helped on every team. I really believe in our system. and it's the volunteers that keep the democratic process going. So, that went really well in this election, but we didn't win, and that's it. There can only be one winner.
What do you think the deciding factor was?
Oh, I think the fact that I think the border issue affected Cumberland North so much. I think that had an issue, and a lot of the other parts of the province don't understand the impact of the border because we're the only county that has a border on another province. And it's interesting to note that when Global TV sent a reporter, they sent him from Moncton. They didn't send him from Halifax. But that's a situation which has to be recognized by people in Halifax, that Cumberland County has to deal with that border, and every decision they make has an impact. But anyway, also, I mean, you can see there was a big swing in the whole province as well. And anyway, that's it. I enjoyed the campaign, proud of what we did, proud of my team, and Elizabeth won.
You mentioned, Mr. Casey, that you wanted to bring a voice to Halifax on behalf of Cumberland County, ensure that Halifax was aware of these situations, these circumstances. What do you think the results tonight said? What do you think they say from voters? What do you make of that?
What does that say? I guess it says they don't want my voice in Halifax, or my voice in Halifax. But no, I don't know. This is very emotional. This is my 9th campaign. It's the most emotional campaign I was ever in, and that's all I can say. But I don't know what drove people to vote the way they did. But again, it's democracy. This is what people wanted, and I fully accept it.
You say the emotion behind the campaign. I guess, what does this mean for your future politically?
Oh, I probably won't run any more than 3 or 4 more times.
You have more left in the tank, even after this.
Oh, I feel good. Look, I said, I think 3 or 4 times now I'm not going to run anymore, and I end up running. If my wife heard me say that,
sure,
pull the rug out from underneath me right now. But
understood.
But anyway, no, I've enjoyed the campaign. We had a wonderful team. Sure. I love politics. I enjoy politics. I enjoy helping people. I very much wanted to be the spokesperson for Cumberland because I know I could have raised the issues that make Cumberland feel like we're not part of Nova Scotia. I could have done a good job with it, but I respect the vote, and people chose Elizabeth, and it's not easy to win as an independent. I've done that, and I know how hard it is.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Casey. Very much appreciated. Sarah,
thank you for coming from New Brunswick to interview us in Nova Scotia.
I'll throw it back to you, Sarah.
Are you surprised by the
Thank you so much, Callum. Callum Smith is in Amherst for us this evening. An interesting chat there with Bill Casey. And yes, thank you to Callum for pitching in from Moncton. We don't have that many people, so we had Callum. It's a team effort here at Global News. We want to bring in David Aiken. Speaking of team effort, he's tracking results for us. And David, we want to talk about those advance votes because Diana Whalen mentioned this in her chat just a couple of minutes ago with Elizabeth McSheffrey. Oh my goodness, it is late here. Talking about how the Liberals were still watching some of these ridings and considering whether the advance voting could change things for them.
Yeah, and just before we do that, can we get that clip and put it viral? Bill Casey saying he's only going to run 3 or 4 more times before he's done. I thought that was a great interview that Callum did up there at Amherst. That was pretty funny. Bill Casey, of course, former federal MP. We know him very well in Ottawa. But about these advance votes, there were a lot more advance votes in this election, just like there's been in every pandemic election in the last little while. There's been lots and lots of advance voting, and advance voting's up. In this particular election, 177,000 Nova Scotians participated with an advance vote. Of those, 10,000 were mail-in ballots. How does that compare to last time? Just 4,000 mail-in ballots and about 100,000 advance votes. Now, do the advance votes break differently on a partisan basis? Here's our experience in other provincial elections during a pandemic. The mail-in ballots tend to break towards a progressive party. In BC, for example, the BC New Democrats won an extra 3 or 4 seats after the mail-in ballots were counted. But in Nova Scotia, Sarah, Lori, I think you'll both agree, there isn't that sharp partisan divide or sharp left-right divide between the Liberals and the PCs. So I'm not sure there's going to be a big mail-in ballot boost for anybody. I don't think the Nova Scotia NDP as well is going to see that boost. On the in-person advance vote, for the last, 5 to 10 years, I've watched Conservative parties across the country, federally and provincially. They do a much better job of getting in-person advance votes. Why is that? People who are older tend to vote in-person advance. People who are older tend to vote Conservative. So as those 177,000 votes start to roll in, and they'll start to be applied all across the province, there might be a slight partisan shift towards the PCs. So when Ms. Whalen talks about, oh, wait for the advance vote coming in, the other thing, every campaign tracks their advance vote. She would know if all of a sudden they were going to pick up 5 or 6 seats with the advance votes. She sort of suggested that was coming, but my sources on the PC side, they do know where their advance vote, and they expect it to come in.
Okay, thanks so much, David. David Aiken is watching all of the results for us. He's got all of this analysis from all of the elections he's covered in the past and throughout the years. And Lori, if the advance votes really do shift things from progressive Conservative wins into Liberal wins, does this perhaps tell us something about the campaigns, particularly the campaign that Iain Rankin and the Liberals ran?
Yeah, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but it would be interesting to see if the vote that was cast before things started to curdle for the Liberals was more Liberal friendly, right? And so if that happens, then it happens, right? Like if there are people who want to make up their mind, they know who they're going to vote for, the campaign doesn't matter to them, or in this case, they may have been concerned about a possible public health issue if there was another wave, for that reason, there may have been an extra incentive to vote early. But sure, I mean, it could certainly be the case. But at the same time, I agree with David that we don't have such a stark contrast between the parties that I think a method of voting is going to be really heavily advantageous to one rather than another. But at the same time, the timing of the campaign matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at some of the areas now in the province where the NDP may pick up seats. So Dartmouth East, this is not one where the NDP are looking to pick up right now. Tim Hallman with the PCs is the incumbent. He's 192 votes ahead of the Liberals. Let's head over to Fairview Clayton Park. I think I may have teed this up. Oh, okay, there we go. Joanne Hussey is 214 votes ahead of Cabinet Minister Patricia Arab. So this is one of the ridings that the NDP may pick up this evening. You can see they're leading and elected now in 10 ridings. That would be a significant change, doubling their seat count. Over to Halifax-Armdale, another urban seat where the NDP were really eager to pick up here. Julie Melanson out to 102 vote lead, 18 polls left to report here. Ali Diwali for the Liberals is trailing behind. Sackville-Cobequid is another area where the NDP are looking to pick up a seat, this time over the progressive Conservative incumbent Steve Craig. Laura Fothrop is just 21 votes ahead. So a lot of really tight races here, still to come, a lot of results that will be finalized. But Alexa McLean is at NDP headquarters in Dartmouth for us tonight, looking at 10 ridings where the NDP is now leading and elected. Alexa.
Well, hello to you all. Sarah here with Dartmouth South candidate re-elected Claudia Chender. Of course, the obvious $1 million question here. How are we feeling after 4 weeks standing here in this moment, knowing that you're going back to the legislature?
I feel great. I mean, I have had, campaigns are exhausting, but they're also an incredible opportunity to just focus all your time on talking to as many individuals as you can about what they care about, what they don't care about, what they want to see from you, what they need, what they're sick of. And so it's vital, not just for an election, but for the life of an elected politician to have those conversations. And it's been amazing. My family misses me, but tonight is great and we feel great.
Celebratory mood here. Yes. How would you describe the atmosphere in this room? It's one thing for me to say it, but for you, how would you describe the NDP vibes right now?
I mean, I think we're all excited and we're nervous and we're watching our colleagues be reelected, which is fantastic. And we're watching our amazing slate of candidates in some really tight races. And so, we're biting our fingernails a little bit, but we're excited. We feel good.
Returning to the House with strength in women numbers, obviously, yes. Suzanne LeBlanc, Dartmouth North, and Susie Hansen. How are you feeling knowing that that representation is still there and hopefully continuing to grow?
Well, it's incredible. I mean, Susan has been a wonderful colleague, a good friend, and she has just been such an incredible representative to Dartmouth North. So I'm not surprised, but I'm thrilled that she's been reelected. Susie Hansen is a powerhouse. Anybody who knows her will tell you that. Halifax Needham has been a traditionally NDP seat for a long time. You know, we've got the legacy of Maureen McDonald and Lisa Roberts, and so we are beyond excited to have her join us in the House.
Oh, we got another buzz here. There it is. What's that round of applause for? Claudia, tell our viewers.
I didn't see. What was it? I missed it. Gary.
Yeah.
We're happy to have Gary back, obviously. So Gary's won his seat. I mean, we feel really good, obviously, about our incumbent campaigns. But we're so excited to see all these amazing other candidates,
Yes, the buzz,
giving it a good race.
Yeah, it's always nice to get that on air and have that reaction real time. So obviously this time around, the writ was dropped in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
So that is unusual, unique, but also the pandemic factor. How did you think that was going to play out, and how did it ultimately play out for you and the NDP election campaign?
Well, we knock on doors all year round, whether or not there's an election. And so we've been back and forth since last March, where when things tighten up, we stay home. And when things loosen up, we go back to the doorstep. And so we've been pretty used to that. And we sort of knew, given the public health restrictions, whether or not it was the best time for an election, that people would probably be okay. And they were. We didn't get a lot of pushback. We were masked. We stood back. We had respectful distancing and good conversations. But, we did expect people to be disengaged somewhat, and rightfully so. It's August. People are tired. They want to go to the cottage. They don't want to talk politics, but that's not what we found. At least in Dartmouth South, people were very engaged. We're very literate on all the issues. We're paying attention and really wanted their kind of needs and concerns listened to. So it was a great campaign in that way. We had a lot of fantastic conversations and not a ton of pushback from people telling us to leave them alone.
Obviously, party leader Gary Burrell said that this platform was really built on real people and real people problems, those things that everyday folks are dealing with. What does that mean to you, and what parts of the platform are connected to those real people challenges?
I said tonight to our volunteers, we put people at the center of our work. And it's always clear. And so I would say every part of our platform is focused around real people. We saw that during that campaign, but I'll tell you, for the last 4.5 years, I see that around the caucus table. I see it in the legislature. I see it in my community. People sometimes think that politicians debate their own ideas, and at least for me, we don't. We champion ideas that people need to have heard in the public sphere. And that's what we do. And so we know that we have a housing crisis, certainly here in the HRM and in lots of other parts of the province. And so we're calling it a housing crisis, and we're responding to that, and people are responding back to us, and not just people who are in the situation of losing a home. Everybody is talking, and they've been talking to us about it for a long time, before this election started. Mental health care is a huge issue for people. School food is a huge issue for people in Dartmouth South. I mean, we have massive food insecurity, even in this district, which people think of as being sort of well-to-do, more or less. We don't have, we're not seen to have huge social issues, but they exist everywhere, right? So we know that the issues that we're talking about are the ones that matter to people and are the ones that need to get fixed. And I think that's why people are resonating.
Thank you for your time. Yeah. Obviously, you have folks waiting to applaud you, so congratulations on being reelected. And back to you all in the studio.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Alexa. That is Alexa McLean at NDP headquarters in Dartmouth, and she and Claudia Chenders scooped us just a little bit, but let's give you that result for Halifax Chebucto. Gary Burrell re-elected there. He will head back to the legislature, along with, it appears at this point in the night, 9 other NDP colleagues, so they will double their representation in the House. A strong third-party showing so far for the NDP. The PCs leading and elected in 29 ridings at this point in the evening. That would put them into majority territory, but there are so many close races here tonight, and that's why we have not yet called a PC majority government. Let's take a look at some of the places where the Progressive Conservatives are leading. In Hants West, They are leading by 209 votes, still some votes to be counted here, so this is a very close race. Over in Kings West, leading as well, the Progressive Conservatives out to a 500 vote lead over the Liberals here, so this would be a pickup for them if this holds. 4 polls left to report. Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank is another place where the Progressive Conservatives are leading at this point in the evening, and I know this was a riding they were really keen to pick up at this point. 206 votes separating them from the Liberal challenger there. So, Lori Turnbull, these are the kind of ridings where the PCs need these results to hold in order for them to hold with the results that we're seeing at the bottom of our screen. 29 is where they're leading and elected at this point. They still just haven't squeaked into majority territory in enough of these ridings yet.
That's it. I mean, I think it's clear that they are enough ahead of the Liberals that, you know, they can sort of rest easy to a certain extent. But no, like, I mean, some of these are going to jump back and forth over the next little while. And then once again, as we were saying, you put the advanced poll numbers in there, and that will, you know, that's going to have an effect. But I think for Houston, like, he can give a very enthusiastic speech. He can feel good about this. I think the parties kind of know where they're going to stand. It's just sort of a question of, are we going to be dealing with that minority, or are we going to be looking at a secure majority? If we end up with a minority, depending on how it falls, you know, if the Liberals and the NDP add up to more, you know, then we'll get into the really interesting stuff about who forms a government.
Shades of 2018 in New Brunswick. I don't know if we're headed in that direction. It doesn't look like it. The math just isn't working out at this point. But we will see how these things shake out with still lots more ballots to be counted. We want to go back now to Ross Lord. Ross is standing by with some Nova Scotians tonight on a panel. And Ross, hoping you can reintroduce yourself and your panel.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, we are going to take another dip into some important issues here with Jim Graham of the Affordable Housing Association of Nova Scotia, Dr. Heather Johnson, who's a family doctor and the president of Doctors Nova Scotia, and Noreen Mabiza with the Ecology Action Centre. I want to start with you, Noreen, because it seems hard to believe, but in one sense, it also seems like the environment got overshadowed again. Maybe understandable to some degree because of healthcare, the pandemic, obviously. But considering there was another report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which paints an even bleaker picture of what is going to happen to this world if we don't get a grip on the effects of climate change, maybe it didn't get the attention it deserved. You've looked at the platforms of the parties in this election. What did you see, and do you see hope there?
Thank you, Ross. So all major parties in this election focused on the environment and took it more seriously than in previous elections. So this definitely gives us hope. But as you say, we have reports coming out of the IPCC, which is showing that we need to take widespread emergency level action in order to deal with this climate crisis. So what we are hoping to see is the government that is elected. We look forward to working with them in order to have a climate plan that has bold action. We want to see resilient communities. We want healthy ecosystems. And we also want to work towards a transition that leaves no one behind.
And I know that's one of the projects that you're working on, is transitioning people who make a living indirectly from fossil fuels and doing it the right way. I think you said that all three of the mainstream parties did at least try to address that issue, right? So presuming we transition the economy, that they are at least trying to look at that issue of how to make sure that those people aren't left out in the dark.
Yes, so we do see there's mention of green jobs. We see the Liberals and the NDP spoke of various just transition plans. So yet again, this is encouraging to see that these issues are being brought to the forefront, that they're being mentioned. But what we also would like to see is action, because there is a gap that exists between rhetoric and action. So we're looking forward to working with the government that is elected so that we can see that action come into play.
Thank you very much, and very well said. Dr. Johnson, I've got a lot of notes here from our earlier conversation. I'm not sure exactly where to begin. There's so much to talk about. But I will talk about, one of the obvious priorities, which is attracting doctors and keeping doctors. And one of the things that the PC government has come up with as an incentive is what they call a physician savings plan to encourage doctors to stay, and also an offer to match some of their RRSP contributions, along with a large bucket of spending that all parties have promised for healthcare. How far do those measures go, or is there more required to finally get our arms around healthcare and at least stop it from getting worse?
Well, we're really looking forward to working with whatever government's in power, and it looks like it's going to be the PCs, to sit down and think about what that's going to mean for the people of Nova Scotia. We believe that primary care needs to be reorganized, and that was one of the main platforms, one of the things that all the parties wanted to talk about. And the PCs had some strong ideas about what that would look like and how they would deliver that. They had some ideas about how to pay physicians and how to recruit and retain them. And one of the things they talked about, which is a little unique, is essentially a pension plan for physicians, which has never been done in Nova Scotia to date. There are a couple of provinces that have that, and it's been fairly successful there. It's the kind of thing we're really excited to talk to them about, to sit down and meet with the new Minister of Health and see where that takes us. See what we can do for Nova Scotia.
You also wanted, to talk about how the pandemic did bring out some good cooperation among agencies or partners within healthcare that maybe goes unnoticed by the public because obviously overshadowed by the pandemic and some of the bad outbreaks that did happen here as well. Can you give us a couple of examples of things that did work out well and showed cooperation that could possibly be an example of the kind of thing that could make a difference?
Being able to collaborate with lots of different healthcare professionals makes a difference. Rolling out the vaccines in pharmacies and doctors' offices, rolling them out in large community centers with lots of public health nurses, lots of physicians coming from their offices, all working together to support that work, and integrating that into one large system was really quite a monumental feat. And it took a lot of work at Department of Health and Nova Scotia Health to figure out how to make that happen. Even things as simple as getting information out to physicians, sharing virtual platforms for people to spread messages, things that would never have been shared in the past. Those partnerships probably can help keep things moving forward and really help us work on the system if we can keep using those strong relationships that were built during COVID.
All right, thank you. Well, maybe some of those sort of, lesser known or maybe things that can be seen as abstract can show themselves on a larger scale and make a difference. Now, I want to turn to Jim Graham, Affordable Housing Association. Jim, you've been in housing for a long time. I want you to tell us how affordable housing got in the bad state that it is, including rents, and what should be done about it.
Ross, there's a couple of reasons I think why we're in the housing crisis that we're in, and why affordable housing particularly has kind of risen up the ladder of issues on everybody's mind. Part of it is really a fairly lengthy time of provincial government inattention to housing issues, no matter who was in power. That didn't seem to make a difference. That's one thing. I think the second thing is the rapid increase in Nova Scotia's population has put pressure on the rental market. And that combined with housing insecurity, particularly in Metro, created around the COVID pandemic, all kind of brought this to a head.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. And I know that you do see some hope in the funding that is going into additional housing units. Maybe we can come back to talk about some of the other ideas like permanent rent control and see if that goes anywhere. Thank you, Jim Graham, Noreen Mabiza, and Dr. Heather Johnson. And we'll throw it back to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Ross. Ross Lord standing by in Halifax with our panel. We want to go now to New Glasgow, PC Party headquarters, where we find Alicia Strauss. Alicia.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Well, things are still feeling very happy here, very jubilant. People are still very excited. And what they're saying is that it was because Tim Houston and his party really led a successful campaign. And so I'm joined here with Rob Batherson. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we got to this point. So, Rob, can you tell me what you think about, why you guys were so successful tonight?
Well, I think Tim Houston last year really developed important policies to improve health care, dignity for our seniors, universal mental health, hope for health, and he was the one leader in this campaign who made health care the #1 priority to fix under a Tim Houston PC government, and Nova Scotians responded to that.
And yeah, we're hearing a lot about that, health care, and that was the main point of the whole platform. What did it take to get the message out to Nova Scotians?
Well, I think Tim's a tremendously hard-working campaigner. He had a great team of candidates, and he was very, very focused and disciplined. And he also had a great team behind him. My good friends Tara Miller and Cameron McKean, I believe spoken with one or both earlier tonight, led a great team of new and experienced volunteers. We had cracked data so that we knew where our voters were and how our campaigns were in terms of getting them out to vote. So a great message on healthcare, a great leader, a great team, a great plan, and the resources to get the job done.
And now this is Houston's first campaign as leader for the PC party, and you guys are seeing a lot more success than in 2017. I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about, how Tim led the team to get to this point.
Well, I think it's very historic that when you look at Nova Scotia history, it's very rare for an opposition leader to win on his first try. Tim is only the second opposition leader to become premier on his first try. The other opposition leader was the late Dr. John Savage in 1993. Usually for Nova Scotians, it takes a while for people to get comfortable with someone. So Gerald Regan was elected on his second try, John Buchanan on his second try, John Hamm on his second try, Darrell Dexter on his third try, and Stephen Nielsen on his second try. So I think Nova Scotians really, really responded to what Tim Houston was talking about to make healthcare the #1 priority of a Tim Houston government.
And so what do you think, this says about, all the work that Houston has put into this?
I think it shows that campaigns matter. In May, the Liberals were leading the PC party by 28 points, and Tim didn't let the polls get him down. He stayed focused, he built a strong team, and went out and delivered a message to Nova Scotians that Nova Scotians wanted to hear, and that's solutions for healthcare.
And now over the past year, we've obviously been going through a pandemic over, I guess, a year and a half at this point. And the legislature hasn't sat too much. We haven't seen a lot of Tim Houston over the last year or so. Was that a challenge to overcome during this campaign?
Certainly. Obviously, Stephen McNeil dominated the airwaves when he was premier. And when Iain Rankin became premier, he had that incumbency advantage. I think what's really interesting is this is the first election in Canada since the advent of COVID-19 where the incumbent government's been defeated. And I think it's sending a message that voters are starting to move on, whether they were satisfied or dissatisfied with the government's management of COVID-19, as we're trying to get back to normal. Back to normal means looking at other issues like fixing health care.
All right, and how much of COVID-19 is going to play a role in the next few months, do you think?
Well, obviously we're in the middle of a fourth wave, and I know Tim indicated last week that should Nova Scotians entrust him with the job of premier, that meeting with Dr. Robert Strang was at the top of his list, consulting with the other opposition parties as well, so that we have a non-partisan approach under a Tim Houston government to deal with public health issues related to COVID-19.
All right, excellent. And just my last question, how are you feeling about everything tonight?
Amazing, amazing. First PC win in 15 years, and if the numbers hold, the first PC majority government in 22 years, and it's been an honor to play a small role as part of Tim's very big province-wide team.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Rob, for taking the time tonight.
Thanks, Alicia.
All right, so people, again, feeling really good about the results tonight, and we are still waiting to hear from Tim Houston. He is expected any time now, so we'll keep you in touch for that. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, thanks so much, Alicia. We will keep our eyes out for Tim Houston to listen to what he has to say. For now, let's keep our eyes on the ticker at the bottom of your screen. The Progressive Conservatives now leading and elected in 30 ridings. That is into majority territory, but a lot of very close races that we cannot call yet here tonight. The Liberals trailing at 15, the NDP with 9. Let's take a look now at your popular vote. This is the way things are breaking out across the province so far tonight. The Progressive Conservatives holding steady here with 41% of the popular vote. The Liberals pretty close behind at 34%. And here are the NDP bringing up the rear at 21%. Let's look at some of the gains and losses, though, from 2017 until now. From dissolution until now. That makes a lot more sense. The PC is going from 17 to 30 if this holds, so they could gain 13 seats if these current standings hold. The Liberals losing 9, the NDP gaining 4. So they have just dropped back, and there are 2 fewer independents on the ticket. That is Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson is the only one who will return to the legislature. Laurie Turnbull, political scientist with Dalhousie University, has been here with me all night long. We've been talking about these results. We've been talking about what's going to happen next. And so now we're looking at the probability, the very likelihood of Tim Houston being the next premier, possibly with a majority. That we will wait to see. But a Tim Houston government, we've heard a lot about healthcare from his team tonight. Every party talks about healthcare. Thinking about the economic promises that they have made, some of the things that stood out to me right away out the gate of this campaign, they talked about this corporate tax cut idea, offering corporations the ability to take back 50% of the corporate taxes they would pay to the government if they promised to reinvest that in Nova Scotians. Do you think that was a big vote mover?
To be perfectly honest, probably not. I think people were listening to his messaging about healthcare. I think Houston really focused on, as I was saying earlier, like the doctor shortage, the nurses shortage, and the fact that 70,000 Nova Scotians don't have a family doctor. I think that message really resonated with people, as opposed to Premier Rankin being a little bit more about the collaborative care. And he would say things like, you should have a doctor, you should be able to see a doctor, not so much the family doctor, not so much that you have to see your doctor. And so I think, Houston found a message that resonated more. The corporate tax piece, I think I can see the logic, I guess, of saying if you as a way of kickstarting the economy and creating jobs after COVID, if your company hires, we'll help pay. You can either pay your taxes or hire someone kind of thing. So it's kind of like a tax cut. I wonder if that's going to make it, is that going to be a point on which the NDP really criticize him? And is that, if in the event of a minority government, is that possibly a grounds on which Gary Burrell doesn't want to work with him? Because it might be more difficult, even though, again, the parties are close together ideologically, is Gary Burrell going to want to stay away from that one?
Another area where they're really quite close together ideologically, and we saw sort of an odd split in this Nova Scotia campaign, is that the PCs are promising 6 years of deficit spending. The Liberals were promising to get back to balance. That's not our typical split that we would expect to see.
No, exactly. I don't think that any of the parties over the past several years doesn't necessarily feel like they have to stay left or right of any other party. It really seems like they all kind of move around, which I would say probably across the country is not usual for an ideological spectrum. Every jurisdiction is different. And even if you look at British Columbia, the Liberals sound different there than they do, say, in Ontario, than they do here. But they are the right party for the most part. There's, at least in terms of the legislature, there is no strong Conservative party there. So every province has its own way of mapping out a party system and giving people somebody to vote for.
Okay, thanks so much, Laurie. Let's head back to Ottawa with David Akin. He's standing by tracking all of the results for us. Places where the Liberals won big in 2017. And David, how are they doing tonight?
Yeah, not good everywhere. Just before I get into that, I just want to pick up on the interview with Rob Batherson just a few minutes ago that Alicia did, because, a lot of people online right now are saying, well, what examples does this election have for the federal election? And one of the interesting things to note here, just to make a quick comment, Tim Houston's team has a lot of people who are working with or advising with Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives. Rob Batherson is the president of the Conservative Party of Canada, and he is very closely tied. The campaign manager for Erin O'Toole is none other than Fred Delory from Central Nova, a cousin of Randy Delory. Fred ran unsuccessfully in Fred Delory. Dave Brabant, who Alicia talked to earlier, also advising both O'Toole and Doug Ford. And this happens a lot in Canadian politics. There is sort of a traveling squad of New Democrats and Liberals and Conservatives that will help out on different campaigns, pick up lessons. And it'll be really interesting to see if the federal Conservatives take a look at the approach Tim Houston had and whether they can adapt any of it to O'Toole's campaign. I'll get back to that story tomorrow, the federal election. In the meantime, you want to see some more fun numbers. Listen, the biggest Liberal win in 2017 was Annapolis, Stephen McNeil's riding. Stephen McNeil won Annapolis by 4,200 votes. He won by 4,200 votes. Carmen Kerr isn't going to get to 4,200 votes. Look at the difference there. It's just a few hundred. That is in the place that was the biggest castle the Liberals had in 2017. Let's go down the Bay of Fundy coast a little bit further, and we get down there to Yarmouth. That was the #2 big victory in 2017. Zach Churchill won by 3,300 votes. Zach's not going to get 3,300 votes. He's leading now by, what's that? Just over 100. This is still in play. 34 out of 37 polls reporting. Zach Churchill has 47.4% to 44.8%. But again, just to illustrate how far down Liberal fortunes have fallen, Churchill, Zach won the biggest, or second biggest, victory for any Liberal in the province 4 years ago. How about we check out Halifax Atlantic? This should be a slam dunk automatic. There it is, right, Halifax Atlantic. Brendan McGuire, the incumbent, he's elected. Congratulations, Brendan. But he won the third biggest victory in 2017. He won by 2,500 votes. Certainly not 2,500 votes split there. That's less than 800. So again, Halifax Atlantic. And finally, the fourth biggest victory for the Liberals in 2017 was, and I'm going to go back to the big mainland Nova Scotia, there we go, was this one that's now blue, Digby Annapolis. So the Liberals have gone from the fourth biggest victory, where they won by 1,500 votes 4 years ago, and right now Jill Balser is elected, and they've had 30 of 31 in, and it wasn't close. 50% of the votes went to the PC candidate, 31% to Jimmy McAlpine, the Liberal, and a vote spread of 600 votes. So as the Liberals look on places to build, they're not really even able to look at those fortresses. When I think federally, when the federal Conservatives got beat, when Andrew Scheer got beat, well, there's always Alberta and Saskatchewan, right? Those fortresses, and we can find candidates, find money, find support. Right now, the Liberals are looking even places like Halifax Atlantic, Annapolis, and down there in Yarmouth. Those castles for the Liberals in Nova Scotia right now, there's just weakness all across the board, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. That just tells us everything we need to know about how the Liberals' night is going. We have much more for you still here to come, with tight races still to be called. Stay with us on Decision Nova Scotia 2021 after this. Welcome back to Decision Nova Scotia. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. So far, the Progressive Conservatives are leading and elected in 30 ridings in Nova Scotia. 28 is the number they needed to reach in order to form a majority government, but there are quite a number of races that are still very close, too close, in fact, to call. So let's start with Dartmouth East. This is where Tim Hallman is just 211 votes ahead of the Liberal challenger here. 5 polls left to report in Dartmouth East. The next one we are going to take a look at, Hants East. Another close race here. John A. MacDonald, interestingly, not the John A. MacDonald, I assume, 180 votes ahead of the Liberal challenger. So 44 of 46 polls reporting in Hants East. And over in Hants West, another very close race here so far tonight. The PCs are out to a 155 vote lead. Laurie Turnbull, these are really tight races. These are really close results and not many polls left to report. So we're looking at this coming down to the wire in terms of whether this is a majority or a minority PC government.
Oh yeah, and I think probably some nervous people at this point, because sometimes you can get those really close races, but we're seeing that across the board, right? Like not every riding, but there's a lot where it kind of, it was really close, and maybe a different day, a different event could have moved something, which can be really frustrating for the person who's coming second. But again, it goes back to that point about we have a kind of electoral system where only all that matters is the person who comes first. And so super frustrating from the party that, that almost made it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, one person who is heading to the legislature without a party banner tonight is Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson, and she is in Amherst this evening. She's talking with our Callum Smith, who's covering the Cumberland North race for us tonight. Callum.
Thanks, Sarah. Here with Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson. Miss Smith Mccrosson, congratulations, first of all. I guess talk about your feelings. What's going through your mind right now?
I'm so happy for the people of Cumberland North. Their voices have been heard.
What does this mean for you moving forward in the legislature, and what does it mean for Cumberland North? You say the voices have been heard. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think people want a return to democracy. People want to know that the person they elect can actually represent them and be their voice and not be punished for doing so. So I think the fact that the people of Cumberland North re-elected me speaks volumes to the desire for true democracy, a return to grassroots politics.
As an incumbent, as an independent,
yes.
How do you make sure your voice is heard in the legislature and that you can speak on behalf of people of Cumberland North?
Absolutely. Well, there's 55 votes, and Cumberland North's vote will be just as valuable as every other vote in that legislature. And I will be speaking to the needs of the people of Cumberland North in every opportunity I have.
Understood. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson. Sarah, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you so much, Callum. Callum Smith is in Amherst this evening talking to Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson, the independent MLA now for Cumberland North. And Lori, depending on how the numbers shake out, there could be quite a lot of power in that one vote.
Oh, yeah. If she happens to be, a potential 28th, if Tim Houston and the Progressive Conservatives end up with 27, that'd be interesting. But I wouldn't imagine that her voting behavior in the House is going to be really that much different. It wasn't a sense that she left caucus because she didn't agree with kind of what vision Houston had put down. I mean, obviously they were competitors in the leadership. I'm sure they don't agree on everything, but I think she is a progressive conservative person. But they had a disagreement, and here we are.
Well, she was certainly one of the most outspoken critics of the Liberal government throughout particularly the COVID-19 pandemic, but throughout her entire time in office that I've seen her so far. I know early on the Liberals sort of raised the specter that perhaps Elizabeth Smith Mccrosson runs as an independent, wins that seat up in Cumberland North, and then Tim Houston takes her back into the PC fold. Do you see that happening?
That would be odd, I think, just because of the way things seem to break down between the two of them, right? I mean, this isn't a question of her shaking his hand and saying, look, really respect what you're doing. I just got to go sit over here now. It was more of a real falling out, I think, on a personal level and a public one in a way, right? And so I can't imagine that that's going to be sewn back together, but I don't think he needs to do that. I think, they'll probably find an ally in her in a legislative perspective, whether they really need it or not.
And her vote, does it become more important to Tim Houston, where he sits right now, leading and elected in 30 ridings? He doesn't need her to get him over that 28.
Yeah. No, he doesn't. But still, I mean, I don't think that we're going to see her necessarily be. I say this, and I may live to regret saying this. We'll see whether she would see herself as a thorn in the side of the government. Does she want to? If it's the case that he's got 30 seats, he doesn't need her. Is she going to be a vocal critic of that government? Like, it's an interesting question, actually, to see how she plays her space as an independent, because usually people are independents because they got that way, because they were removed from a caucus. It is rare to be elected as an independent, so we'll see how much she really breathes life into that. And it may be, judging on the basis of her comments, going back to grassroots politics, maybe she's going to, be a bit of a difficult spot for any government.
Okay, and we know there are still a number of races that are still too close to call this evening. So the PC is leading and elected in 30 ridings so far. The Liberals trailing at 15, the NDP at 9. These results have held for quite a while here tonight. Let's have a look at some of the places the Progressive Conservatives have beat Liberal incumbents. So Randy DeLaurie, the former health minister, justice minister, is not going to return to the legislature in Antigonish. Another riding where the Progressive Conservatives have picked up here, I believe. This is Colchester North. So Tom Taggart is the MLA. This is kind of an interesting one, Lori. We can come back to Tom Taggart and the way that he got elected here, but another municipal councillor who's elected here. Let's head over to Digby Annapolis. This is another riding where the Progressive Conservatives have won over the Liberals. And so these are the pickups that are leading to the Progressive Conservative win here this evening. Let's head over to Eastern Shore. Again, another Progressive Conservative pickup over Kevin Murphy, the Speaker of the House, longtime Liberal MLA, so he will not return to the legislature. There will certainly be a new Speaker. Guysborough Tracadie, a cabinet minister here. This is Lloyd Hines. He will not return to the legislature either, so the Progressive Conservatives are picking up quite a number of important Liberal seats, and we're seeing this theme of them picking up seats, particularly in rural Nova Scotia. Let's go now to Elizabeth McSheffrey. She is not in rural Nova Scotia. She's in Halifax tonight at Liberal headquarters. A very different story for the Liberals tonight. Elizabeth.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, you know, despite the early lead that we're seeing for the PCs right now, folks in the room generally seem to be having a good time. And I want to introduce you right away to our next guest. Very excited to be speaking with Thomas Musial, 18-year-old volunteer for Iain Rankin's campaign in the riding of Timberley Prospect. Tell me, what drove you to politics? Why did you decide to get involved?
Well, my aunt asked me for the opportunity to work with Iain, and I thought elections only happen every 4 years, so I might as well try it out. And it was really cool. I got to meet a whole bunch of new people, discover a whole new area. I'm really proud of our team. We were out there for hours every day of this election, knocking on doors, and the feedback we were getting was really good. Everyone loved Iain. Like, you could really tell that people genuinely liked Iain. Like, we went to Beachville yesterday, and everyone was really happy to see him. It was a great time.
All right, so you did do a lot of door knocking this campaign. Tell me, what were some of the issues that you heard folks speaking about?
The health care, rent control, things like that. But it is what it is. Yeah.
Okay, and tell me, after everything that you've experienced, how do you feel about politics and political engagement moving forward? Have you got the bug?
Yeah, it was a really fun experience, and a lot of youth people are getting out there. Like, I saw a lot of my friends in other ridings, like out in Armdale, really volunteering a lot too. So it was great to see. Like, all my friends were Liberal, so it was great to see.
All right, and you're a youth yourself, heading to university in the fall.
Yeah.
What are some of the issues that you care about most?
I guess really just the whole pandemic in general, which I think Iain did a great job in handling. I think we're one of the best places in North America in terms of COVID. We have really low cases. So I really think we'll do a good job of handling the pandemic, because I'm looking forward to going to university without like masks and things like that. And hopefully everyone can get like vaccinated and things like that, yeah.
Well, I certainly understand your desire there. And, you know, I just want to ask as well, after all the hard work that you did, door knocking in some really, really hot weather, what's it like to see the results that we are seeing so far tonight?
I think we did well in our riding, but I'm really proud of our team. It was a fun experience getting to know them every day. I saw them every day for hours and hours. It was good to have that team bond, you know, that relationship. I really miss door knocking with them. Like, it kind of seemed long in the time, but now looking back at it, it was a great experience, and I'd like to do it again someday.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Really appreciate having you here. And I'm going to toss it back to you and Laurie in the studio, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Elizabeth McSheffrey is at Liberal headquarters for us this evening. We're going to go now to NDP headquarters because Gary Burrell has just arrived. The leader of that party is walking in. You can see him here greeting supporters, greeting some of the newly elected MLAs who will be in his caucus when the legislature resumes. He's walking in and expected to speak quite shortly. These are rooms full of supporters, as you can typically imagine, but I think he's trying to find the stage here. There he goes. He's finding the stage. So we expect to hear from Gary Burrell in just a few moments, but 9 NDP MLAs at this point. Still a lot of close races. So Gary Burrell returns to the House in Halifax-Chebucto as the leader of what looks to be a strengthened NDP caucus. Let's listen in on what he has to say.
Hi, Dave. Well, all of our great friends. It's a campaign that has not from the start followed the script that our opponents expected and wanted. It was supposed to be a pretty sleepy, dozy affair where everybody kind of had their minds on nothing except the summer. And instead, we found that all those people that we have met on all those tens of thousands of doorsteps have been so engaged and so interested and so concerned. concerns we've talked about with so many people about housing and about mental health and about the emergency of the climate, child care, long-term care, the path out of COVID towards recovery. And for 32 days, we in our party have placed these issues of real people's real lives at the center of the discourse of our campaign. Every day of the campaign, we've opened the day with a public conversation, often at a picnic table or at a bleacher or somewhere in a park, with somebody for whom our party's program in this election would lighten the load and would make a particular real difference. Before and after school care, rent control, mobile mental health emergency.
We've been listening to NDP leader Gary Burrell speaking this evening, but Liberal leader Iain Rankin is also speaking. So we're going to head over to Liberal headquarters right now. Apologies to Gary Burrell, and we're going to listen in to what Iain Rankin has to say.
Here, and I know that you will feel the same way too. As politicians and as leaders, we are in this to serve Nova Scotians. You asked me on July 17th why we called this election. We called it because we believed that we are in a pivotal moment in our province's history, and we wanted to have a clear direction. Tonight, the voters provided it and chosen our future path. You can never make a mistake casting your ballot, and I respect that. I respect our democratic process that gives us a chance every 4 years to have a voice, to ask for a change, and to judge us on our record and our ideas. Over the breadth of the campaign, my team, have traveled over 9,000 kilometers, and what was clear to me was the pandemic did not defeat our province. In many ways, it made us stronger, wiser, and sharper, able to tackle anything and succeed. I saw that on each and every doorstep, no matter where I was, in Guysborough, in Yarmouth, on Cape Breton, in Clare, and back again here in Halifax. And I heard optimism and hope for the future. And I'll continue to have optimism for this province, no matter what. It's humbling to see the support we have to receive from one end of the province to the other. The gifts for our future baby. And thank you very much, Nova Scotians. Nova Scotians are so welcoming and generous, and I will never forget the doctors, the nurses, the continuing care assistants, the healthcare providers who have worked so hard after the last 18 months for what they've done for this province, who put their lives at risk. And I've heard you, and I've heard about the toll the pandemic has had and taken on your lives and your families, and I understand. Thank you for all that you've done. And thank you to all Nova Scotians for your sacrifices over the course of the pandemic. Although we have not finished the fight yet against the pandemic, we are close. And to all Liberal candidates who have fought so hard, I'm so proud of you, the work that you've done. The people that were on this list of candidates for the Liberal Party, the most diverse that we've ever seen, I couldn't be prouder. I know it was a challenging race. It's always challenging after you've been in government for over 8 years, trying to get a third mandate. But I had fun. And the people that stepped forward, that really valued what they believe in, and the vision that we put forward in this race, I still wouldn't change anything. The positivity in our campaign, I still believe in positive politics. No matter what happens, I will still continue to believe in you and in Nova Scotians and what we can really do. equity, environment, economy. The Liberal Party still stands for those issues, and I will still continue to do that. No matter what I do, and I still believe all Nova Scotians believe that those things connect. That is my life mission. No matter where you come from, no matter what you believe in, you can make it in this province. You can make it in this country, and Nova Scotia can be a leader in how we tackle the tough issues, just like we did with the pandemic. We are a leader. We can tackle these issues. No matter who just formed the government, I will support the government, and I ask all Nova Scotians to do that. We need to. But as Liberals, we need to find a way to make sure that every single Nova Scotian has a role. That's what we believe in as Liberals. And I will continue to lead this party. I will continue to do whatever I can do to fight for every single Nova Scotian to make sure that we have a voice, that every single Nova Scotian, no matter where you come from or your income level, no matter where you live, no matter your race, no matter what you believe in, your faith, your sexual orientation, you have a role in making sure that you have a voice in how we recover from this pandemic. We are leaders in this pandemic. We will be leaders in the recovery no matter who's in government. So thank you to Nova Scotia. I will be there for you and be there for Nova Scotia. Thank you.
Okay, you've been listening live to Liberal leader Iain Rankin's speech there, and Laurie Turnbull is here with me we've just been listening to Iain Rankin. We had to cut off Gary Burrell, so we're going to go back to NDP headquarters. Pardon me, no, he's done speaking. So that was a bit of an unusual situation there, Laurie. Typically the parties sort of know when each other are going to be speaking and they wait and they go in order. That didn't happen here tonight.
Yeah, and that's kind of unfortunate. It's a sign of civility between the leaders. I find that when we're in a point now where politics can be so toxic, and it's hard sometimes to maintain positive relationships between the different parties. But usually on an election night, when you see the leaders kind of accepting the results and congratulating one another and handing over, kind of preparing for a transition, which is going to clearly happen here. It's good when they let each other speak before interrupting them. So that was unfortunate.
Yeah, perhaps a miscommunication between the two parties there. Yeah. It's unclear. So we didn't get to hear what Gary Burrell had to say, but we did hear what Iain Rankin had to say, and it's pretty clear he intends to remain as Liberal leader, as opposition leader heading into this legislature.
Yeah, he certainly didn't give any sense that he was going anywhere, and he spoke to some of the priorities that I think he did signal when he became Premier, like when he was sworn in. He created an Office of Equity and Inclusion, which was a significant step for the government of Nova Scotia, and he talked about that. I think he kind of hit some of those points in his speech tonight about, no matter where you come from or what you believe in or what your background is, you have a voice, you have a role here. And so, we might have gotten a bit of a sense of what he plans to prioritize as opposition leader if that's what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to bring David Aiken into this conversation. David, you were listening to Iain Rankin's speech there as well. Certainly sounded a little bit subdued over at Liberal Party headquarters, not the night he was hoping for. No, it isn't. And listen, you guys, I think, were too polite. That was a real low-class move by Iain Rankin to jump over Gary Burrell's speech. All of those rooms have TV monitors in them. They can see our show. They can see what's going on. And absolutely, if the outgoing Premier Rankin, couldn't see the TV screen as aides could, and they should have said, hold up a second, Iain, because Gary's speaking. And Gary Burrell and the NDP, look, they ran a pretty decent campaign. I just had the Halifax results behind me, and look at that, a nice little solid lump of New Democrats in Halifax. They beat some Liberals tonight, and Gary Burrell, I think we wanted to hear from him and what he had to say, particularly about rent control, because as you know, Sarah, you know as well, Laurie, that was a real big issue for folks in the biggest urban center in the province. Would have been nice to hear from Gary Burrell. So also, I think the Iain Rankin saying, I'm sticking around. I will continue as Liberal leader for the party. And I don't get the sense, I never got the sense during this campaign, I haven't been getting it all day since we learned of these polls closing. I don't think you guys have. There's no Paul Martin to Jean Chrétien. You know what I'm saying? There isn't somebody in the wings
ready and waiting to go, saying, get out of the way, Rankin. I want to try my hand at this particular party. So I guess Iain Rankin will have a little bit of runway at least, but he will have to quickly show that even though he said he wants to support the government, whatever, he's the official opposition leader, and opposition leaders need to oppose government policy. That's the only way they can be effective. Their partisans will want them to do that, and so we'll see if he can switch and see what it's like looking right to the speaker instead of left to the speaker. Did you get that?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, David Aiken. We are going to take a short break. We are going to be back with more results in a moment. Thanks. Welcome back to Decision Nova Scotia 2021. Thank you so much for being here with us. If you're just joining us, just before the break, we heard from Liberal leader Iain Rankin, now the official opposition leader, or he will be, conceding to Progressive Conservative leader Tim Houston in this race. And Lori, we heard Iain Rankin talk about how he will remain Liberal leader. Just before the break, David Aiken was saying there doesn't seem to be a clear succession plan. If that wasn't the plan for the Liberals, there isn't really somebody waiting in the wings to take over at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly the party would have spoken about, what do we do if this doesn't go our way? And so Rankin would know at this point, that this was kind of their plan in the event that they didn't win. And so I think we probably saw right from the get-go when McNeil announced that he was resigning, there was no clear successor to him either. And then there was this kind of silent period where we weren't sure who, if anybody, was going to run to replace him. And then, it seemed like we had three contenders, all of whom came from McNeil's cabinet. And so there was a bit of a void around, sure, three strong contenders for sure, but no women. No diversity on the ballot. Nobody knew who was coming on, fresh and who hasn't been elected before. And so, maybe the party, I don't know, they'll keep Rankin for a while, and then as part of their soul searching, as part of their rebuilding, I wonder who will be leader next.
I mean, the one thing for the Liberal Party is that there are an awful lot of incumbents who didn't get re-elected tonight. Yeah. So there will be new faces around their caucus table, and perhaps that gives them an opportunity to reinvent.
For sure. And I mean, that's the natural life cycle of a party, right? It's not, again, easy for me to say when I'm not the one who's facing that. But at the same time, it's a normal and natural thing for a party to win for a while and not win for a while. And it does give you an opportunity to rebuild, because when you're in government, you're governing, right? When you're in opposition, you're playing that challenge function, but it also gives you a little bit of time to be able to figure out how you want to reposition. And so, for better or for worse, the Liberals have that now.
So we will see what happens with the Liberal Party going forward. We did hear from Iain Rankin conceding to Tim Houston. We're waiting to hear from Tim Houston tonight. We do want to tell you, though, that as we have across the bottom of your screen all night been showing you that the Progressive Conservatives are leading and elected in 30 ridings. 28 is the number they would need to get to a majority, but there are still lots of close races. So let's get to those right now. Let's have a look at Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank. So the Progressive Conservatives leading here by 206 votes, with still 3 polls left to report. Heading over to Dartmouth East, this was a Progressive Conservative incumbent riding. Just a 273 vote lead for Tim Hallman so far, with 2 polls left to report. So we're getting down to the wire, heading to Eastern Passage. Another incumbent Progressive Conservative riding, Barb Adams, 216 votes ahead. And 2 polls left to report. Hants East is our next riding that is very close. So these are the ridings that could put the Progressive Conservatives into majority territory if they can hold on to them. But as you can see, just 134 votes separating John A. MacDonald from Michael Bloys. 2 polls left to report there. 1 poll left to report in Chester St. Margaret's. And Lori, this riding was one of the ones that kept us up really late in 2017. Yeah. It is another close one, although not so much the 3-way race that perhaps we expected to see or could have seen. It's coming down to the Progressive Conservatives and the Liberals there. But we saw this in 2017. There were a number of ridings, Jeff McClellan's riding, if I recall correctly, up in Glace Bay, Chester St. Margaret's, that kept us up really late. We were waiting to find out, does Stephen McNeil get a majority or a minority government? And now Tim Houston is doing that waiting game.
Yeah, and I mean, that riding was I think on everybody's ridings to watch list because it was so close and because it's gone to all three parties, you know, at some point in the not too distant past. And it was when the incumbent, you know, went from Liberal to Independent and then didn't reoffer, it was wide open. And so, yeah, it's very, very close, but we're seeing it getting finalized at some point soon, I guess.
Okay, let's bring David Aiken back into the conversation. He's been tracking all of the results for us. But David, I know as soon as this is over, you are going to be focused on a different race. And so what kind of implications does this race tonight and the result tonight for the Liberals have over in Ottawa where you are?
That's right. Well, and you know, this has been a great topic on social media. I've been keeping track of folks all around the country who are political geeks like you and I are, watching this race and trying to figure out what sort of lessons might there be for federal campaigners. One of the ones I kind of like, and this comes, it's not my idea, it's from Kate Harrison, who works here in Ottawa. She's a conservative-minded activist. And she said, take a look at what happens when an incumbent calls an election without a clear ballot question. And that's what happened in Nova Scotia. Did Iain Rankin ever sort of get the idea, here's my vision, here's where I'm driving things? And quite clearly, both Gary Burrell and Tim Houston had a clear ballot question. Well, think of the federal campaign. Justin Trudeau's been 2 days now, not a clear ballot question. That opens up space for opposition leaders to define the ballot question themselves. So that's one of the things I'll be interested to see if that translates out when I get on a plane tomorrow to go to Vancouver to pick up the Justin Trudeau campaign.
Yeah, and David, you know, it's interesting that you talk about that not having necessarily a clear ballot question, because we saw this a year ago in New Brunswick. It was a very similar style of campaign run by Blaine Higgs and the Progressive Conservatives there, and yet Blaine Higgs is a majority government leader at this point.
Yeah, and a different time, of course. We had no vaccines at the time, and everybody was wondering, how the heck can you do an election in the middle of a pandemic? And he did it. And of course, Blaine Higgs was basically saying, I need to be in charge. And that was the message, I guess, that resonated to a degree for those in New Brunswick, and he won it. I mean, the other thing, too, that I think is sort of an upside down world. If I'm here in Ottawa, Nova Scotia politics is upside down in this sense. Tim Houston, when got confronted about, oh, what are you going to do about the deficit? Tim Houston, the Conservative, said, to heck with deficits. Spend on healthcare right now. We need to do that. He wasn't interested in talking about debt and deficits. And of course, Aaron O'Toole and the federal Conservatives, well, they do have some deficits. If you ever watch Pierre Poilievre's video, he's like crazy that we're spending too much. Now, on the Liberal side, Justin Trudeau has been all about spend. We're $350 in deficit this year. He doesn't care because it's important to keep Canadians safe. And yet in Nova Scotia, Iain Rankin, our healthcare system, we can tinker here, but we have to balance that budget. What's the message then? Clearly, voters in Nova Scotia said, we're not interested in balanced budgets, thank you very much. We're very interested in spending on healthcare, government intervention on rent control. Those are the important things for me. So if you're a federal campaigning politician, I don't think you're going to find a lot of purchase. And we know from polling, there is not a lot of purchase or interest in controlling federal deficits and debt at this time, even though that's something federal Conservatives do want to talk about.
So in that case, David, do you think the federal Liberals can perhaps take heart in the fact that the voters in Nova Scotia at least seem to have said, let's spend the money?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really what it's come down to. Let's spend the money and we'll worry about the consequences a little later on. I'm just looking at, there we go. We'll spend that and we'll deal with the consequences later on. Now, that said, I did find it interesting with the interview we did with Ms. Whalen, the finance minister, a little earlier. I mean, at some point in time, Nova Scotia is not that flush. Nova Scotia will have to sort of put itself onto some sustainable finances. But this is the other thing that Tim Houston, taking over now, is he's going to join a chorus of premiers, Doug Ford, Francois Legault, Brian Pallister in Manitoba, who've been screaming at the federal government to increase federal health care transfers in a substantial way. Aaron O'Toole has put it on the table that he's ready to make a major increase to the provinces for federal health care transfers. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals will talk about it. I think health care transfers, I think at some point will be an issue federally, how much money the federal government's ready to support its premiers. And now, again, here's Tim Houston absolutely ready to jump in with those premiers that are wanting the federal government to do much, much more to support provinces on their health care costs.
Okay, thanks so much, David. We'll check back in with David Aiken a little bit later on. Lori Turnbull, I want to talk to you about something David mentioned, about Nova Scotia being sort of upside down world. If you're thinking about it in this context, so Tim Houston comes in, he is now going to be the Premier of Nova Scotia. He has said all through this campaign, I can work with the federal government. I can work with the Liberals and Justin Trudeau. And he has distanced himself from Aaron O'Toole. So to what extent does Tim Houston now need to maybe build some bridges there?
That's a really good question, and it'll be interesting to see how the Conservatives do in this part of the world, federally in that part of things. I think that Tim Houston could work absolutely fine with the Prime Minister. I don't think, as much as Trudeau might have liked it if Rankin won, I didn't see him making huge efforts to make sure that happened, and so I don't think this is going to be a major problem. I'm not sure if Houston's going to make any effort with Aaron O'Toole at all, frankly, because if he's banking on Trudeau becoming the Prime Minister, he's taking these steps to distance himself from O'Toole. I don't think he wants to wind that up. I think his red Toryism is probably a big reason why he won.
Okay, and Lori, we are just waiting for Tim Houston to take the stage here this evening. You can see in the screen behind us that he is making his way through the room into Glasgow. As Alicia Drous has been telling us all night, a pretty jubilant room over there. They are quite excited to see Tim Houston. So he's going to make his speech, of course, a victory speech, a bit of a different mood from the others that we have heard. We heard Iain Rankin earlier conceding and talking about how he will continue to be the Liberal leader, how he continues to believe in the province, and he respects the results of this election. So it is Tim Houston's turn now to take the stage. I'm not sure, Lori, I don't know if you can see him. I don't think I can see him in this shot. I'm not sure exactly where he is. I think we're starting to hear.
I think any moment now we'll see him come out of somewhere.
I think we're starting to hear signs that he's coming. One thing that I do want to say is that Tim Houston, and Gary Burrell said this as well, but Tim Houston did promise me in our one-on-one interview that if he was elected Premier, we would have fixed election dates in this province.
I remember him promising that, and yes. I'm excited for that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if this happens, because I think we've heard this before in Nova Scotia, correct?
Yeah, and he's not the first Conservative leader to be committed to it, for sure. But that would be great. I hope that works out.
We are the only province in the country right now without fixed election dates, which is why I think, Iain Rankin took a little bit of heat for calling this election in phase 4 of a 5-phase recovery plan in a pandemic, with an expected federal election call to come. Mm-hmm. Okay, it looks like Tim Houston is now entering the room. That was a false alarm. Those are his campaign co-chairs welcoming him into the room. But I do think that Iain Rankin took a little bit of heat. And Lori, do you think that political opportunism was something that haunted Iain Rankin through the campaign?
To be honest, if that was a factor, I think it was a minor one. Okay. I think he probably wanted to go earlier. I think he wanted to go as soon as McNeil announced he was stepping away and made that majority into a minority, and Miller stepped away. I think he wanted to go then. But we had that wave in April in Nova Scotia, and it became impossible.
Right, the third wave there in Nova Scotia. David Aiken is standing by. He's listening. We're watching for Tim Houston, to come into the room and to take the stage and start speaking. But before, he is. He's making his way up to that stage. But before he does, David, the federal government now, federal parties now need to try to get an election in before the fourth wave becomes too much of a factor. Oh, we can't hear David at this point. Hang on. That's okay, David. We're just watching Tim Houston enter this excited, progressive Conservative room. Here you are.
What I wanted to point out here, this is the first pandemic election that I've covered. Sarah, you and I have covered. This is the second you and I have covered. You'll remember when Blaine Higgs won, it was a completely empty, I don't know what it was, a banquet room at a hotel because of social distancing in that first wave. We didn't know what was going on. But now with everybody vaccinated, look at that. You can actually have a victor walking through a crowd that's chapping and clearing and patting him on the back, and here he goes.
Hugging at his campaign co-chairs, who are no doubt quite thrilled with the way things have turned out this evening. Let's listen to Tim Houston.
Oh boy. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, guys. Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. What a night. What a 32 days, what a 3 years, what a night. Thank you so much, everyone. First things first, of course, thank you to the voters of Pictou East. Thank you for your continued belief in me, your support of me. Thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to serve our wonderful community. Thank you, Pictou East. Well, friends, let me begin tonight by reminding you of where we were just a couple of months ago. As recently as the end of May, the pollsters and the pundits, they had us back 28 points in the polls. Wow. It was going to be a historic Liberal landslide. As for those so-called experts, they were all writing us off. Well, I wonder what they're writing right now. Because make no mistake, tonight, together, we made history in this election. And not just here in Nova Scotia, but in all of Canada. We proved that just because there is a pandemic doesn't mean government gets a free pass. We proved tonight that accountability still matters, that ideas still matter, that solutions still matter. Because politics is not a sport. It's serious business. And everywhere in Nova Scotia, real people have real issues. And they are counting on us to solve them. Like a doctor shortage, an ambulance crisis, an underinvestment in our seniors. And regardless of what the polls may say, what we know is if you provide real solutions to people's real problems, then the voters will pay attention. And tonight, to all Nova Scotians, I recognize the weight of what happened tonight. You have now given us a mandate to govern. And tonight, I am proud to say, we are ready to govern. This is an incredibly special night for all of us. And there are so many people that I want to thank. And of course, when you do that, there's always a risk that you accidentally forget somebody. But I'll give it a shot. And first of all, of course, thank you to my beautiful wife, Carol. You joined me as a partner in this crazy adventure, and I could not have accomplished what we've accomplished without you as my partner. Thank you. I love you. And thank you to my kids, Paget and Zachary. We love you. Thank you for being patient with me. Supporting me and sharing your dad with Nova Scotians. Thank you. And I hope that I make you proud, because you both make me very, very proud. Thank you to my parents, both sets of my parents. Thank you. We love you. Thank you for everything you do for us. My sister, Leanne, is here somewhere. Where are you, Leanne? Thank you for your support, and of course, our brother is never far from us. So Love you. Thank you. And I could stand here for hours and thank people. Maybe I will. Don't worry, I won't stand here for hours tonight. But I do want each and every one of you to know your support of our family and of the party is something we'll always cherish, and I thank you for that. I owe you all so much. Thank you, each and every one of you, for what you've done for us. Thank you to the campaign teams here in Pictou County. It was painful for me to not be here in Pictou County, knocking on doors and sharing time with my friends and neighbors. But I knew that we had a campaign team here that had it under control. Thank you to the Pictou East campaign team. Thank you. And thank you to the provincial campaign team. Your efforts has been remarkable. I know some of you have really dedicated years of your life to this. This result tonight is a result that we share together, and I'm so proud of you. Thank you. There's an incredible amount that goes on behind the scenes. So much work goes in behind the scenes, and it's truly it's one of my greatest memories of this. Is so humbling how many people put their lives on hold to help me be at my best during the campaign. Thank you for that, and of course, and of course, to the slate of candidates across this province. 55 in total. I'm so proud of you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for having the courage to put your name on a ballot beside my name. I will never forget that. Thank you so much. And I know you put the name on the ballot because you believed in our plan to fix healthcare, our plan to support our seniors, our plan to grow our economy. I know that some of you are celebrating tonight in a very big way, and I know who you are too. But I know, of course, others are disappointed, and I want you to know that each and every one of you, I share in your joy and I share in your sorrow, and I'm so proud of all of you, and I thank you for putting your name forward. This was the most diverse team of candidates that our party has ever fielded. The most diverse field of candidates. I'm proud of that. And tonight, Nova Scotians elected PC MLAs in places that have not elected a PC MLA in a long, long time. I thank you for more people than ever are finding a home in our party, in the PC party. And my friends, I assure you, we are just getting started. Just getting started. And I want to give a very, very sincere thank you to our opponents who, whatever our disagreements may be, I respect that you chose to run, and I know you chose to run and perform public service out of the love of this province. And the public service forces us to be at our best, and I thank you for putting your name forward. Thank you, Iain Rankin, for your commitment. Thank you, Iain, for your commitment to the province and for bringing new ideas and new attention to issues like climate change and diversity. These are incredibly important issues. Thank you, Iain, for putting a focus on those. Thank you, Gary Burrell, for running a very Thank you, Gary, for running a spirited campaign that drew attention to serious issues like housing affordability. I thank you for that. And I want to take a moment to thank each and every single candidate across this province from every party who put their name on a ballot. It takes courage to do that. And I also want to acknowledge that there are people on campaigns in every corner of this province, of every political stripe, who worked tirelessly, who knocked on doors, who hammered in signs and volunteered their time in the name of democracy, and it is incredibly important. So thank you so much. And I actually know right now my mom is saying, for heaven's sakes, will you take a drink of water? Thank you for all those candidates. Thank you so much. Win or lose, blue, red, orange, or green, Nova Scotia is better off for your service and sacrifice. So I thank you for that. And now to the people of Nova Scotia, on behalf of our Nova Scotia team, thank you. Thank you for voting for us. Thank you for putting your faith in us. We worked hard to earn your support, and we will continue to work hard every single day to keep your support. I may be the one on stage, but it's Nova Scotians. Nova Scotians, you are the ones that spoke loud and clear in this election. You are ready for change. You are ready. You are ready for the vision put forward by the PC party. Whether you don't have a family doctor, whether you want access to mental health, whether you have a loved one waiting for a bed in long-term care, whether you want a better paying job or your business to grow, you share the hope that I have, that our whole PC team has, for a beautiful province where everyone can reach its full potential. And for the next 4 years and beyond, I will give you I will promise you this. I will give you everything I have to fix healthcare. I will give you everything I have to make this a better province. It won't happen overnight, and it will cost money. But if we work together, we can get the job done, because there's an opportunity right here in front of us to seize a brighter future. And that starts with a belief in what our province can do, a belief in each other, a belief in our communities, a belief in our fellow Nova Scotians. We can put Nova Scotia on the path to financial sustainability and fix our healthcare system. We can support our traditional industries and build an environmental plan that fights climate change. We can make our province a magnet for doctors, investors, and tourists alike, and remain proud of our traditions and our heritage, no matter how long you've lived in this beautiful province, no matter who you voted for in this election or how you vote federally, no matter the color of your skin, your gender, who you love, how you pray, or the language you speak. Our PC government will listen to you, will respect you, and we'll do everything in our power to make access to healthcare better and make your life more affordable. We have worked so hard, but the work is just getting started. There will be tough decisions ahead. But tonight, we can share the optimism for the future of this province. We can have hope that healthcare will get better, and we can have hope that tomorrow will be better than today, because it will. At the very beginning of this election, I said we are solutionists, and I stand by that. And based on tonight's results, it appears we have a few Nova Scotians who also identify as solutionists. I am proud of what we've accomplished together, but I know we're just getting started. But I will tell you this, change is coming to Nova Scotia, and I can't wait to get started. Thank you so much.
Well, that concludes our coverage of this 41st general election here on Decision Nova Scotia 2021. The PC party has won. We do not know whether they'll form a majority or minority government, but Tim Houston will likely form the next government. On behalf of all of my colleagues across the province and everyone behind the scenes, thank you for being